Hey everyone! Today we're diving straight into the story of a kid who got locked up for putting his own old man in a coma. But get this, it was all part of a master plan. So stick around till the very end to catch this wild story called Juvenile Detention Center. You know the drill. Smash that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so we can hit 100,000 followers. Without further ado, let's get right into it. This is a juvie facility holding young offenders up to 18 years of age. The most ruthless teens in all of South Korea are locked up right here. Violence and crime are just their daily bread and butter. But there was this one kid who'd suffered a whole lifetime of abuse from his dad. Until one day, he finally fought back, beating him so badly he left him in a vegetative state. The judge slapped him with a 3-year sentence. To scrape together some cash behind bars, Charlie put up with every kind of abuse you can imagine. He was even forced by Kim Sung-ho to fish a 501 coin out of the toilet, using nothing but his mouth. Charlie was desperately hoarding every single cent, all to keep a massively important promise. When his childhood best mate, Dae-yeon, came to visit him in the lockup, she was shaking with pure rage seeing his battered face. She begged him to just fight back for once in his life. Then Dae-yeon pulled out the few coins Charlie had been stashing away for her. They'd made a promise ages ago that once they finished high school, they'd move out to Seoul together. As for the money, Dae-yeon told him she'd handle it herself. She pleaded with Charlie to just stay safe inside and to keep his head down, since starting a punch-up could just add more time to his sentence. Our boy just wanted to tough out those 3 years, get out in one piece, and head off to Seoul with Dae-yeon. But then Jin Woong-ho, the top dog of Cell 36, started stirring up trouble again. He ordered Charlie to hand over his photo, but our guy actually had the guts to talk back. Jin Woong-ho's hand was a split second away from smacking him across the face. But right at that exact moment, a guard walked in with a fresh inmate. Someone in Cell 36 instantly recognized the new bloke. His name was Ma Guom. He'd beaten 7 gang members to death, copping the maximum sentence for anyone under 20. Jin Woong-ho sneered at him. Who gives a toss if you killed 7 blokes? No one in here is a bloody coward. He shoved his hand out, telling Ma Guom to toe the line from now on. But he completely blanked him, absolutely fuming. Jin Woong-ho threw a wild punch at the new kid, but he dodged it without even breaking a sweat. His movements were insanely fast. Now here's where we need to pay attention, because Charlie realized right then that this killer of 7 was built entirely different from the rest of the inmates. But a second later, Jin Woong-ho's elbow slammed right into Ma Guom, totally catching our main guy off guard. As Ma Guom took the beating, he looked like nothing more than a useless weakling to everyone watching. But no matter how much they gave him a hard time, he flat out refused to do a single favor or run any errands in the cell. And thanks to the new bloke copping all the attention, Charlie ended up catching a lot less grief. That very night, Charlie asked him if it was really that hard to just suck up to the bloody cell leader. In this place, the top dog is the law. Charlie gently suggested that Ma Guom should probably read the room a bit better from now on. But the inmate just looked at him and asked, "Have you always lived such a pathetic life?" I know what you're thinking. Those words stung hard, and Charlie couldn't stop them bouncing around in his head. Our main guy, who'd always had a rough trot, just wanted to keep surviving the exact same way. His only plan for when he got out was moving to Seoul with Dae-yeon, who was an orphan just like him. The next morning, Dae-yeon rocked up to the prison carrying a packed lunch she'd made herself. She was really worried that, because Charlie was so shy, he wasn't getting enough to eat in there. But right at that exact second, a massive truck violently smashed into her. The lunch she'd made with so much love was instantly scattered all over the road. The very next day, a guard broke the news to our boy about the tragic crash that happened right outside the gates. The split second he heard the news that Daeyeon was gone, he felt his heart absolutely shatter into a million pieces. Back in his cell, Charlie just stared blankly at the photo in his hands. Meanwhile, the cell leader wouldn't stop hurling insults at him. "You useless piece of crap. Why the hell didn't you scrub the dunny today?" he screamed, while all the other inmates crowded around, mocking him. Hearing that she died, Jin Won-ho snatched the photo off him and smirked. "Trust me, mates. You and I both want to see this bastard get what's coming to him. Stick around for this absolute madness." Because the sickest part was who actually insulted the girl in the photo. Our main bloke kept his head down, and no one had a clue what he was plotting, but Magyeon was watching him like a hawk, sensing something was dead wrong. Jin Eung-ho just kept mouthing off, completely blind to the fist rocketing straight for his face. A split second later, Charlie dropped him to the floor with a single punch, leaving the rest of the inmates absolutely frozen by the sheer impact. Even Magyeon was left totally gobsmacked for a second. Just a bit earlier on the assembly line, Charlie was talking about Magyeon's old man, the right-hand bloke to a notorious mob boss. He'd practically beaten him to a bloody pulp ever since he was a little kid, but no matter how rotten that monster was, that bastard was still his father. Charlie copped it all on the chin until he just couldn't take it anymore. Right when that piece of trash father tried to lay a hand on his one and only dear friend. Absolutely humiliated, Jin Eung-ho ordered the other inmates to beat Charlie to death. But pay close attention here, mates, because our main guy already knew exactly how to hold his own after copping years of brutal beatings. He used to hold back so he wouldn't drag out his sentence, but right now, every single bloke in that cell looked as fragile as wet paper. Jin Eung-ho completely bricked it and begged for mercy, offering him an absolute fortune, but our boy couldn't care less about money anymore. There wasn't a single reason left to make it out of that juvie alive, not a single motive to keep putting up with the pain. To the Charlie standing there right now. Both of those things were long gone. Back in the day, his deadbeat old man's favorite thing to say was that he should become a gangster. Charlie endured that bastard's endless torture until his entire body was covered in painful, ugly scars. Those brutal bashings were a daily thing. And young Charlie didn't even have the guts to look straight into those terrifying eyes. That monster he called a father warned him, "You've got what it takes to be tough. One of these days, you're going to have to carve this pattern right into your own bloody skin." Back then, the only way out for a totally lost Charlie was to unleash all his absolute fury through those dragon eyes. Hearing the massive racket, the guards busted in. But by then, the cell had already gone dead quiet again. With completely dead, hollow eyes, Charlie took the fall and ended up locked away in solitary confinement. Completely numb, our main bloke just stared blankly at the blood-stained photo he was still clutching tightly in his hand. He flashed back to his first day of school, when his old man beat him up like usual. Daeyeon was absolutely fuming, asking him what kind of father would ever do something like that. I know what you're thinking. Mates, it's bloody awful. But our guy had already gotten totally used to that daily hell. Daeyeon was so ropeable she wanted to march over and confront the bloke. But Charlie warned her to never go anywhere near his house. Daeyeon let out a frustrated sigh, promising him that the second she finished school, she'd pack up and move far away to live in Seoul. She was just dead sick of the miserable orphanage and the suffocating vibe of that dirt-poor neighborhood. She wanted to graduate from a top uni, score a job at a massive corporation, and drive a fancy imported car. Wear expensive designer bags and live right by the Han River. And she even asked Charlie to go with her. She asked him to wait for her and to leave together. So they made a promise right there, while an old bloke walking past snapped a beautiful photo of them. Back then, Charlie was full of bright, beautiful hopes for his future. But now his entire life was completely shattered. He kept agonizing over the fact that if he'd never gone to prison, she would have never gotten hurt. Charlie just kept punching the wall over and over in pure desperation, trying to numb the gut-wrenching pain eating him alive inside. Even with his knuckles bleeding raw, he didn't feel a thing. Even the guard, knowing the brutal reality Charlie was dealing with, felt a deep sense of pity for the poor bloke. But the officer couldn't exactly play favorites, even though he knew our main guy hadn't eaten a single bite since the day before. The guard told him he just had to keep pushing forward. Meanwhile, the next day, the other inmates wouldn't stop gossiping. Our guy had literally wiped out an entire cell all on his own. Everyone knew that after copping a beating like that, there was no way a humiliated Jinung Ho could hold on to his top dog status in the prison. Suddenly, an inmate got shoved face first into his food by Perrin Chan, a bloke locked up for aggravated assault, who'd taken a keen interest in Charlie as the new boss, warning the rest of the mob that absolutely no one was to challenge his authority. 1 week later, Charlie was finally let out of solitary confinement, while Jinung Ho was still stuck in hospital from the absolute thrashing. Honestly, he only survived because the officer took pity on Charlie's situation and only locked him up for 1 week. And mate, trust me, we all learned real quick that it's best not to mess with our main guy. When Charlie got back to his cell, mate, check this out, 'cause Majim reckoned that by stepping up to the top dog, the other inmates would take Charlie out in a heartbeat. But in reality, the blokes were just trying to get on his good side. That's when Magium realized a massive truth. At school, it's all about family status, looks, and how bloody good your grades are. But in this juvie, strength is absolutely everything. During yard time the next day, our main character walked up to Magium because something was really bugging him. That day, when Charlie nearly finished off the cell boss, Magium stopped him. Our bloke just couldn't wrap his head around why. You took out 7 people, so why the hell did you stop me when I was about to do the same? When Magium bashed those criminals to a pulp, even he didn't know why he did it. Just as he was about to answer Charlie's question, Park Jong-chan rocked up with a filthy look on his face to confront our protagonist. Why'd you have the guts to challenge Jinung Hop's authority? You gunning for the top dog spot in the cell, mate. Charlie gave him a cold stare and told him to bugger off. Since he couldn't care less about any of that, Park Jong-chan cursed under his breath. The bloke had no manners. What he hated more than anything were deadbeats who didn't know their bloody place. Park Jong-chan wanted to show him, on behalf of Jinung Hop, exactly what happens to a dog that bites its owner. But right at that moment, a prison guard cleared his throat while patrolling the area. Even so, the officer just had a quick squiz and kept walking like absolutely nothing was happening. Turns out the cell bosses could get into scraps under the excuse of keeping order. That was the law in this hellhole. That's why Park Jong-chan acted like he owned the joint, even though he couldn't figure out why Charlie looked so flat, like a stray dog with no fight left in him. If things kept going like this, the whole joint would be dead boring. But right here, keep your eyes peeled for what our protagonist discovers. The tat on Jong-chan's hand was exactly the same as the bastard who ruined his life, seeing that the bloke was about to have another crack at him. This time, Charlie fired back with absolutely everything he had. He slammed Jong-chan straight into the metal bars, viciously twisted his wrist, and unleashed a brutal bashing like an absolute storm. Since the day he was born, the only way Charlie could let out his rage was through that dead cold, destructive glare. Taking the hits was always his strong suit, right up until he heard that familiar scream back home. His old man told him with sheer disgust, "Your mate barged into my house without asking and started spouting utter rubbish. He even had the nerve to say a father like me shouldn't exist, so I had to teach him a bloody painful lesson." Putting up with crap was his greatest talent, but on that exact day, Charlie finally reached his absolute breaking point. Our main character launched a surprise attack and battered his old man until he was left in a total vegetative state. The doc reckoned the chances of him waking up were next to nothing, short of a bloody miracle. When Charlie went on the attack again, he grabbed the attention of every single inmate. I know what you're thinking, another punch-up this soon. No one expected this kid to stir up trouble again. Park Jong-chan's tattooed hand ended up completely mangled and wrecked after the attack. With a dark, freezing stare, Charlie locked his eyes right on that tat. Meanwhile, someone was watching the whole scene unfold from up above. John Chanchio, the center's director, smirked, saying it was a massive relief the kid was keeping his mouth shut. Though he was dead curious to know who'd rocked up to visit this kid who'd only just got out of hospital. When yard time wrapped up, everyone headed back to their cells. Magium started scribbling in his new notebook, 'cause no matter how much he thought about it, he reckoned he was sharing a cell with someone absolutely extraordinary. Right then, a guard called out to Charlie again, but this time it was 'cause he had a visitor waiting for him. Our protagonist couldn't even begin to imagine who the hell would be coming to see him right now. His mum ditched him as a kid, and the rest of his relatives had cut ties with him ages ago. While the lad wondered who on earth was looking for him, he realized he was being taken straight to the director's office. A familiar face greeted him with a smirk. Shiganri was mighty pleased with his son's brutality out in the yard. Charlie froze dead in his tracks. His scum of a father had miraculously woken up from his coma. And believe me, not even Shiganri himself could believe it. Get ready with me for a bloody wild story, where a terrifying mafia underboss ends up in this absolutely miserable state, all thanks to his own son. Waking up in the hospital and taking it all in, Shiganri wasn't furious at all, mate. He was absolutely thrilled. His heir was exactly the ruthless monster he always wanted, a true chip off the old block. As a father, he'd do absolutely anything for his boy, so he reckoned he had no other choice but to murder that girl. Turns out, it was Shiganri himself who personally ran over and killed Daeon. In that very moment, as Daeon lay dying on the ground, she looked up only to lock eyes with a face far more terrifying and cold than any ghost. At first, Shiganri thought his son was a dead loss, a bloke who only knew how to cop a beating, but the day the kid finally snapped, he saw his true potential, and that girl was the key to waking him up completely. Since the boy had strayed way too far from his destiny, Shiganri had to sacrifice the young girl to force him right back onto the right path. It was all to trigger Charlie's ultimate awakening. Now pay attention here. Mates, the warden absolutely lost it when our boy threw a brutal punch, charging at Shiganri at an insanely ridiculous speed. But the very next second, a barrage of stun darts was fired straight at the young bloke. A violent electric shock ripped through his body instantly. The guards used their stun guns to pin him down. Shiganri glared down at him with utter disgust and asked if he wanted revenge. You want to kill me with your own bare hands, your own father. I'll tell you the only way you'll ever pull that off. In this juvie, there are a few junior members of our very own gang. They're just a bunch of fresh-faced rookies who just got their ink, but quite a few of them will become key leaders down the track. You need to prove you're the toughest bloke here. I want you to take absolute control of this whole facility. If you manage to earn the gang's respect and climb the ranks step by step, one day you'll reach my level, and you can kill me with your own bare hands to inherit the full power of the Heavenly Dragon clan. What Shiganri couldn't achieve after years of bloody battles, he expected his own son to do for him. His life would be complete, all thanks to Charlie. Shiganri looked smugly down at his boy, Dot lying completely wrecked on the floor. He left the rest to the warden. But right then and there, something totally unexpected happened. I know exactly what you're thinking, but just look at how he rips out those bloody stun darts. He was never going to play along with that bastard father's script. Today was supposed to be the day he died. But suddenly, a mysterious bloke jumped in to stop Charlie's attack. Bowing his head, he apologized. explaining that he had to disrespect the young master, since protecting the big boss was his absolute main duty as a subordinate. However, the Heavenly Dragon Combat Squad leader got a massive bloody shock. The young master was holding him back completely, just using the raw, brute strength of his legs. Shigonri told his son to open his bloody eyes. In his current state, the kid couldn't even manage to land a scratch on him. The old mobster insisted that acting purely on impulse would ruin absolutely everything. His only real shot at killing him was to dominate the whole prison. Consumed by pure rage, Charlie hit his absolute limit and shot daggers straight at him. Seeing that murderous look, the old man smirked, buzzing for the next lethal showdown with his son. Over in the woodwork shop, Mayim was wrapping up his daily chores when another inmate suddenly crept up on him. Faking a trip, the bloke dropped his toolbox with a massive crash. A nail rolled right up to his feet. Mayim's heart skipped a beat when he saw Gun Ming, an arsonist and mugger, who gave him a bloody cheerful wave. It was the first time they'd crossed paths since they finished high school ages ago. Of course, Mayim remembered exactly how dangerous this bloke was, and the guy immediately wanted to ask him a seriously dodgy question. Rumor had it that Mayim had murdered 7 people. Gun Ming seriously doubted the Golden Boy would ever pull off something like that, especially since he remembered him as a squeaky clean model student ever since they were little kids. Right then, the guard barked at them for chatting and ordered them straight back to their stations. Once he cooled off, Mayim scowled. He'd been so rattled that, without even realizing it, he'd cut his hand while distracted. Heading back to his cell, he started having a real hard think about everything. From that moment on, his one and only goal was to destroy his old man, but he still had no bloody clue where to even start. So that's where we're leaving it for today. While the inmates are dreaming of pizza, our boy is already cooking up something massive, and you and I will soon find out exactly how he's going to pull off his bloody revenge. Come along and watch this bloke call over the prison guard, just to demand he fetches him some pizza. That bold move grabbed everyone's attention straight away, but it wasn't long before the inmates were actually smashing down the pizza and saying cheers to Charlie, while Magorm realized his first gut feeling was bang on the money. Both the warden and the guards under his thumb were treating Charlie like absolute royalty just because he's Chegengrian's kid. So our main bloke wanted to push his luck and see exactly what he could get away with in this joint. While they were stuffing their faces, the inmates were trying to figure out exactly how much pull this mysterious bloke actually had. But Magorm just slinked back into a corner, looking totally grim, keeping his thoughts completely to himself. The very next day, the inmates were busy working the usual grind, when Yun Gun Min's hand conveniently slipped again. The sharp nail he'd secretly prepared jammed straight into Magorm's flesh. He spun around, his face completely dark, and glared fiercely at Yun Gun Min, demanding to know what the hell that was about. A massive inmate next to him scoffed, asking if this was what he'd been bragging about all along. Yun Gun Min had been skiding earlier that this terrifying, cold-blooded monster was nothing but his lapdog, and the rest of the cell block was waiting to see this supposed obedience. And listen closely here. Mates, because Yun Gun Min's big talk about being some local tough guy turned out to be absolute rubbish. He smirked wickedly and fired back that they shared way too many beautiful memories from back in the day to be playing pretend. He stared right at Magorm and asked if he'd already forgotten, promising to help jog his memory. He grabbed Magorm by the head and slammed it brutally straight into the table. Back in their school days, they'd locked him inside a storage shed locker, which was absolutely covered in rusty nails from top to bottom. Magorm had begged and pleaded desperately for Yun Gun Min to let him out. But the bloke just coldly replied that the game was only just starting, threatening to use a hammer to drive those nails in, one by one. Pinning him down in the present, Yun Gun Min whispered right in his ear, asking if it was all coming back to him now, while the rest of the inmates crowded around to watch the bloody show, laughing their heads off. Even after hearing the rumors that Magum had supposedly wiped out 7 people, Yun Gun Min himself wasn't buying it for a second, so he gripped a nail and swung his fist straight at his face. But I bet you didn't see this coming. The attacker's hand was instantly caught in a death grip that wouldn't budge an inch. Magum stared him dead in the eye and coldly asked if he really wanted to see him end someone's life, right as the head guard stepped in, screaming his lungs out. He ordered the pair to break it up straight away, but before backing off, Yoon Gun Min made sure to shoot a filthy, ruthless glare over his shoulder. He was still dead set on the idea that Magum was nothing but absolute trash. Later that exact same night, back in the cell, Charlie decided to give Magum a genuine, heartfelt thank you. At the end of the day, if Magum had actually offed that bloke, his sentence would have been dragged out for another 10 long years in the clink. If that happened, Charlie would lose his one shot at taking down his own old man, a bloody debt he was absolutely going to collect. Late in the night, the guard on duty pulled the urgent business card and ordered Magum to go scrub down the carpentry workshop. Spotting a moth resting quietly on the workbench, Magum couldn't help but get completely sucked back into his dark, old memories. Yoon Gun Min was actually the very first mate he'd ever made, but the bloke's weird obsession with collecting bugs made him look like a total freak to all the other kids. The other boys used to give him grief, mocking him and asking if he was planning to eat the bloody things. Every single time they picked on him, Magum stepped up as the class rep to cool things down and keep him safe. But neither of them ever really figured out exactly when they started drifting apart. Once they got shoved into different classrooms in second year, their chances to hang out just plummeted. That was until one day, Magum caught a bunch of classmates whispering out in the middle of the hallway. They were saying that loser Yoon Gun Min had become the bully's new favorite punching bag, and that they'd just dragged him kicking and screaming to the storage shed. The second Magum heard that, he bolted like a madman straight for the shed to try and save his old mate. But unexpectedly, Yoon Gun Min sneaked right up behind him in the dark. He violently shoved him straight into the storage locker, all because Yoon Gun Min desperately wanted to be accepted by the very same thugs who used to make his life hell. The sick condition was that he had to hand over his most prized bug, so after catching a live moth, he coldly pinned it down and turned it into a dead specimen. Suddenly, Yoon Gun Min rocked up to the carpentry workshop, snatched up the moth, and sneered that everyone absolutely hates moths, but they love butterflies. And you know what the worst part was? He told him it was all his own fault, leaving Magum completely, utterly horrified. Brace yourselves, mates, because today we're diving into how Yoon Gun Min figured out that even though Mayom acted like he had his back on the surface, he was actually pulling away behind his back and, when push came to shove, completely sold him out. To everyone else, Mayom was the beautiful butterfly everyone adored, while Yoon Gun Min was treated like a grotty little moth. Figuring that out made waking up every single day feel like a total bloody nightmare. Mayom was shaking with pure rage, his whole body reacting to those words, and he absolutely went off at Yoon Gun Min, telling him he was completely off his rocker. Mayom swore blind it was all Yoon Gun Min's fault, the bloke who then went and sent 7 people to the grave. But right at that moment, a bunch of other inmates rushed in and pinned Mayom down by his arms and legs. Turns out, Yoon Gun Min had already slipped a bribe to the guard on duty. The real freak show was just kicking off, because he was planning to turn Mayom into a bloody science experiment again. And this time around, Gun Min stuffed the locker full of his own creepy crawlies. He was dead keen to see Mayom's reaction, knowing exactly how terrified the poor bloke was of bugs. With bugs crawling all over him, Mayom gritted his teeth, but he still didn't let out a single peep. The beefy inmate excitedly asked Yoon Gun Min if he was fair dinkum about this. After all, Mayom got tossed in here for offing people, but Yoon Gun-min couldn't care less. If anything, the big bloke absolutely frothed over that completely unhinged side of him. Now pay close attention, mates, 'cause Yoon Gun-min wanted the whole lot of them to hear Mayom screaming in pure bloody terror, livin' in person. But then Charlie rocked up right out of nowhere and got straight in Yoon Gun-min's face. He wanted to find out firsthand exactly what Yoon Gun-min's screams of agony would sound like. Another inmate instantly lunged at Charlie, but he was way too weak. The bloke went absolutely flying from a single hit, slamming right into the locker where they had Mayom locked away. Charlie looked at Mayom and told him to listen up, 'cause his debt was being wiped clean today. That was more than enough. It was sketchy as hell calling Mayom down to the woodwork shop just to flick off all the lights. That's exactly why Charlie had already cornered the guard patrolling the block beforehand. He straight up ordered the officer to pop the cell open. And thanks to that, our main man managed to bust into the woodwork shop just in the nick of time. Yoon Gun-min cracked a smirk, saying he was pretty jealous of Mayom for having such a rock-solid mate. The massive inmate had heard all about Charlie too, the bloke who'd been stirring up trouble all over the joint lately. He rated the fact that Charlie valued loyalty, so the big fella straight up asked our boy if he wanted to be mates. Next second, Charlie absolutely flattened him with one brutal, earth-shattering move. I know what you're thinking, he doesn't need rubbish mates like that. Our MC glared right at the blonde, demanding to know why he was making Mayom's life a living hell. Yoon Gun-min roared back, totally ropeable, asking if Charlie was taking the piss. According to him, that traitor put him through pure bloody hell. On the surface, he treated me like his one and only childhood mate, acted like he actually gave a damn about me. But behind my back, he was just a filthy snake trying to sink its fangs in and finish me off. So if you're gonna hang around him, you'd bloody well better watch your own back, mate. Just then, the beefy inmate shot back up and grabbed Charlie in a chokehold from behind. The bloke was built like a brick outhouse, but our MC wasn't having a bar of it. He forced his way out by snapping the guy's fingers right back, giving him multiple nasty fractures. But right at that split second, Yoon Gun-min whipped out a blade and lunged straight for Charlie. The bloke had totally lost the plot. It was absolute madness. Even the massive inmate couldn't help but be impressed by his dead-set ruthlessness. But then Mayom wrapped his arm tight around the big fella's neck from behind. Yoon Gun-min didn't see that coming at all. Turns out, Mayom had managed to slip right out of the locker. Charlie had actually kicked the bloody lock clean off earlier. After breaking loose, Mayom swung his leg up, delivered a brutal kick right to Yoon Gun-min. He was insanely close to dropping him. Right then, Mayom squeezed his grip even tighter. Blood started dripping down the heavy iron chain wrapped around his bloody hands. The beefy inmate finally couldn't cop it anymore and passed out cold. Straight away, Mayom locked eyes on Yoon Gun-min. The bloke was absolutely terrified by his overwhelming presence. He was sprawled on the floor, cowering before Mayom and practically begging for mercy. I think I just lost my mind for a sec. I'm just a useless nut job. Please, just pretend I was having another episode and let me off. But Mayom never bought for a second that Yoon Gun-min was just having some random episode. His entire life got totally wrecked because of Yoon Gun-min's selfish, paranoid delusions. That was the harsh, bloody truth. At first, Mayom figured that since he'd already sent 7 blokes to the grave, wiping out one more like Yoon Gun-min wouldn't make a lick of difference. But looking down at him now, he just didn't feel that burning hatred anymore. At the end of the day, back in the past, he really had looked at Yoon Gun-min as a genuine mate. And let me tell you, mates, Gun-min absolutely froze on the spot the second he heard those heavy words. Stick around for this. 'Cause all she could think was, what the bloody hell is this drongo banging on about? Yoon Gun-min swore he'd wait for the perfect chance to gut Magom, but Charlie wasn't about to go easy on him. Yoon Gunmin got knocked out cold in one hit, paying the price for that knife wound he dished out. Magom was just about to thank Charlie when some other bloke rocked up and stood right over Yoon Gunmin. The top dog of cell 23 demanded coldly, "Yoon Gunmin, why'd you step out of your cell without asking?" Even though he was already out cold, the boss of cell 23 smashed a fist right into his face. All because Yoon couldn't catch a cockroach in time. Completely setting off the leader of cell 23, a chill ran straight down Charlie and Magom's spines. Gunman copped an absolute beating until his whole body started twitching. The cell 23 leader's face was covered in muck, so he grabbed Charlie's clothes to wipe it off. Then he crazily asked if he was clean, and Charlie just told him nah. His face was still absolutely gross. To pay close attention here, mates, 'cause the furious head of cell 23 launched straight at our main girl. But suddenly a guard stormed in, yelling that if they were done mucking around, to get back to their cells immediately. The cell 23 leader glared right at Charlie, memorizing her number, 7,199. The next day, the inmates of cell 36 crowded around our protagonist. Gunman figured something out real quick after watching Charlie absolutely shatter someone's hand. That show of force was more than enough to make sure no one would dare step up and start trouble with her from now on. She couldn't care less about that, though she just needed to track down the Crimson Fire Dragon, the blue dragon decked out in red flowers. Charlie had to find the blokes with that exact tat on their bodies, 'cause every single one of them worked for that bloody gang. But the catch was, the prison was packed with way too many inmates. Gunman stepped up, bragging that he knew his stuff, so she could ask him absolutely anything. Our main girl replied that she was hunting down some tattooed bastards. That night, the prison put on some boring educational videos about cracking down on school bullying. Once again, Charlie coldly muttered that scumbags like that deserved to rot in a cell for the rest of their lives. I know what you guys are thinking, but Gunman chimed in saying that not everyone locked up is actually a bad person. Ages ago, there was this legendary tteokbokki joint in his neighborhood that everyone swore was bloody delicious. Gunman was a regular there, but one day, the son of a local politician swaggered in. That posh tosser threw his dad's weight around, acting like a total animal. He completely trashed the place just because he didn't like the rice cakes. So Gunman stepped right up as the self-proclaimed rice cake captain. In the end, Gunman actually won the scrap, becoming the rice cake hero who saved their beloved shop. But he still ended up behind bars anyway, all thanks to that psycho who just hid behind his daddy's power. Another inmate scoffed, saying he was just showing off and blowing hot air again. Everyone knew damn well that Gunman's nickname was the king of spinning a yarn. Rumor even had it that a previous cell boss bashed him for talking himself up too much, which was exactly why he got moved to this cell. But Charlie reckoned his eyes didn't look like the eyes of a bloke who was lying. Out in the wild, aphids feed ants, and the ants keep them safe. That's exactly how the dynamic worked between Gunman and the Crims. Reaching this point, Gunman had finally clued on to how things worked. Charlie, who was calling the shots in cell 36, didn't mind him tagging along. Gunman figured if he became her right-hand man, he could cruise through the rest of his sentence easy as... He was grinning like an idiot while doing the yard work, but then he accidentally flicked dirt onto the psycho boss of cell 23. Gunman's heart practically stopped as his absolute worst memories came flooding back. He'd just run right into his worst nightmare all over again, a cell boss who was a total clean freak. Gunman just couldn't wrap his head around why that bloody nut job had to be right there. The boss asked him with a wicked glare if his face was clean, and shaking like a leaf, Gunman stuttered back that it was squeaky clean. He let it slide for now, but still sprayed him right in the face with bug spray. Trust me, mates. You will not want to miss what happens next. The second that corrosive liquid hit Gunman's face, His eyes instantly started watering from the intense burn. Stick with me here, because this is where the boss of cell 23 tells Gunamine he's got a huge favor to ask him. He'd busted his gut trying to keep clean, but that bloody number 7,199 called him a filthy grub. The boss of cell 23 wanted Gunamine to team up with him to sterilize and disinfect the place, and you could clearly see a tattoo of a blue dragon with red flowers right across his body. Back in the cell, Charlie had just finished smashing out 100 two-finger push-ups, racking his brain over where the hell he'd seen that dragon tat before. Out of nowhere, Gunamine started praising his spinal posture and chest like it was an absolute work of art. Then he handed Charlie a glass of tamarillo juice, the perfect stuff to bounce back after a heavy workout. Looking at the weird liquid in his hand, Charlie asked Gunamine straight up where he scored it. Feeling a bit guilty, Gunamine explained that he obviously bought it using the cash from their account, but offering juice out of the blue looked dodgy as hell, and this is where the other inmates started egging them on. They wanted Gunamine to take the first sip. His heart just dropped with fear, but the very next second, Charlie downed the whole thing in one go. Tomorrow was cleaning day, so he told everyone to go and get sorted. No matter how much he thought about it, Gunamine never expected Charlie to scull that juice without batting an eye. After all, that first glass only had real juice in it. He just wanted to test the waters with Charlie. That same night, our main bloke started sketching out the design of that crimson fire dragon. Gunamine couldn't help but ask why he trusted him, because with his reputation and shit attitude, it was pretty much impossible for anyone to back him. Charlie just replied cool as a cucumber, saying that liars are bloody smart. A smart bloke like you wouldn't make up bullshit, lies just to piss me off for no reason. The next day, since the Ministry of Justice was coming in for an inspection, the inmates kicked off a massive cleanup. In the bathroom, Gunamine told the boss of cell 23 that he was bailing, and the fallout was pretty damn obvious. The boss was never going to forgive number 7,199, so he decided to take care of disinfecting Charlie himself. But right at that moment, our boy rocked up and asked what the hell the two of them were doing mucking around in the bathroom. You bastard. You're absolutely filthy. Getting shoved against the urinal. Gunamine knew he'd made the right call. See, he'd already spilled his guts straight to Charlie earlier, explaining how some bloke threatened him into using pesticide. He reckoned that as a real man. He'd never dog on a mate, and he'd rather cop a massive beating than take that dodgy deal. But the biggest deal was what Gunamine actually dropped. Pay close attention here, because it turns out the guy who threatened him was rocking that exact crimson dragon tattoo Charlie had been hunting for. Back in the bathroom, Charlie just straight up wiped his hands on the cell 23 boss's clothes. That absolutely set the boss off, screaming that he was going to kill our guy and let his body rot in corrosive acid. Charlie just looked dead at him and dropped one cold line. You make way too much bloody noise, mate. He slammed him brutally into the deck, since this prick had that damn tattoo. Charlie could beat the absolute living crap out of him without a second thought. Back in the day, the boss of cell 23 was a heavily scouted prospect in the fight scene. His signature move was pinning his opponent down with both legs, then crushing them and taking bites out of them bit by bit. He'd push his opponents to such an extreme state that they couldn't even tap out. But ever since some bloke gobbed on him, he never pulled that move again. Ironically, this dirty fighter ended up developing the most fatal flaw for a brawler in his position, hardcore germophobia. Charlie started grilling him about the Celestial Dragon Gang, but the bathroom floor was absolutely crawling with bacteria. The boss roared in absolute panic, screaming that his skin was going to rot off, while just mocked him. Still got time to worry about germs at a time like this. Our boy wasn't about to waste another second. He shoved his hand straight into the urinal to soak it, gearing up to dish out some seriously effective shock therapy. That hand, drenched in God knows what, was just about to get shoved right into the cell boss's mouth. But the very next second, Charlie's body violently staggered back. And that's where they leave us hanging. What the hell's going to happen now that Charlie's ended up getting pinned down? Brace yourself, mate, because today you and I are going to watch the leader of Cell 23 squeeze his legs together to crush our main bloke's organs. Off to the side, Gunamin was second-guessing whether he should jump in and help, but he quickly clicked that something wasn't right. In his entire life, Charlie had never once gotten a hug from his old man. Whenever his dad taught him how to fight, the only hug he ever copped was a chokehold. That was the most sickening and vivid memory Charlie held on to. The one he wanted to remember the least, but, funnily enough, that's exactly why ground fighting felt as natural to him as drinking water. The spine of the leader of Cell 23 started making these messed up noises. Our MC was actually getting a bit curious. What was going to snap first? His own internal organs or the other bloke's spine? Pretty soon, a brutal, bone-crunching sound started echoing from the Cell 23 leader's body. The unbearable pain had him frantically tapping out on Charlie, begging to surrender. But thanks to his bastard of a father, Charlie never actually learned what surrender meant. The leader of Cell 23 sank into absolute despair. Out in the yard, the other inmates were still cracking on with the big cleanup, and they'd already jammed a funnel into Cell 23 to torture the leader. He was stubbornly refusing to spit out any info about the Celestial Dragon Gang, which was really starting to piss Charlie off. But heads up, mate, this is about to get pretty bloody ugly. For a massive germaphobe, this was the ultimate death blow. That powerful Korean crime syndicate was known as the Celestial Dragon Gang. They sported a crimson fire dragon tattoo as their mark, a flashy blue dragon wrapped in red flowers. The blue dragon stood for sheer authority and strength, while the red flowers represented vitality. This gang trained up a massive bunch of highly promising young thugs. They raised them under a ruthless survival of the fittest system, completely culling out the dead weight. One day those seeds were meant to bloom into dragonflowers, being right at the bottom of the food chain. That was all the leader actually knew. In the end, he just couldn't handle Charlie's torment anymore and had absolutely no choice but to spill his guts. Honestly, Charlie finally clocked that the brutal training his scumbag dad put him through since he was a kid was all about making him bloom before anyone else. The bloke even thought our MC was asking about the gang because he wanted to join him. He even had the guts to say with a smug tone, "If you keep your nose clean from now on, I might just be nice enough to put in a good word for you with the Celestial Dragon." Hearing that, Charlie let out a cold laugh and choked him even harder. The bloke had already blabbed everything he knew, but looking at him pissed Charlie off so much that he decided to bash him all over again. After sorting him out, our MC just went back to the big cleanup with the rest of the inmates. His goal was to totally wipe out absolutely every single Celestial Dragon member locked up in this prison. But there were just way too many tatted up blokes in the joint. And tell me, were you wondering as well if these Celestial Dragon blokes had anything in common? That reminded Charlie that the two blokes he'd already smashed were both cell leaders. So that meant he'd have to track down every single cell leader. But Gunamin told him not to bust his gut over it. Because next week there was a cell leaders meeting gathering all of them up, supposedly to build some bloody camaraderie. In reality, that's where all the dodgy deals inside the prison went down. That's why they also called it the Crime Syndicate Conference. Guna warned Charlie to be bloody careful. After all, the blokes gathered there were the most vicious crims in the country, and the ones showing up to this meeting were the absolute worst of the lot, second only to the top dog crime syndicates. 1 week later, the cell leaders meeting kicked off right on schedule. All the cell leaders had heard that Park Jong-chan and the germaphobe bloke got wiped off the map by some bloke named Charlie. That kind of arrogance. It pissed him right off. Right at that very moment, the door slowly creaked open. Our MC snapped the shovel leaning by the entrance, then moving at bloody lightning speed, he launched himself straight at a cell leader, the one sporting the Crimson Fire Dragon tattoo. He was going to crush every last seed of the celestial dragon before they ever got the chance to bloom. And that's where we leave it, with the rest of the leaders staring at the scene completely gobsmacked. Charlie fired up the leader of the fire dragon. Come have a go. Mate, he challenged him. But Cheon flat out refused. Even though the cell block leaders used violence to keep order, he knew damn well there was a strict rule before they could make a move. Stick around, mates, and let's see what happens with the 3 cell block leaders our main guy just absolutely wrecked. First up, there had to be some bad blood between them. Cheon called it a rock-solid excuse. And right then, he had absolutely zero reason to kick off a pointless brawl with Charlie. If our bloke still had the guts to push his luck and mess with the prison's pecking order, the rest of the cell block leaders would never let him get away with it. And this sketchy, reckless move from Charlie was just him trying to prove his own gut feeling. As long as someone was acting like an absolute loose cannon, it didn't matter who they were. They'd turn into a massive pain in the backside for the cell block leaders. Cheon clocked onto it pretty quick. Right from the get-go, Charlie never actually planned on throwing hands. He could feel the sheer hatred radiating off our main guy towards the celestial dragon. But to Cheon, him being so full of himself was just straight up pathetic. Once the host rocked up, the cell block leaders meeting officially kicked off. At this meeting, aside from the 3 Charlie had already knocked out, every single other cell block leader showed up. Our guy saw that around 15 leaders made an appearance today, counting himself as the new head honcho of Sector 36. Other than Cheon. He still couldn't figure out who else was sporting the celestial dragon ink. In this lockup, any hustle the leaders ran to make a buck was just known as the shop. A cut of the market profits had to be handed straight over to the warden. The host announced that somebody hadn't paid up their dues this season, and it turned out to be Cheon's casino. Cheon just smirked, blaming it on a simple slip-up. But some white-haired leader brought up a sketchy rumor that had been making the rounds in the blocks lately. About the casino. The one that bragged about being dead set fair, honest and taking massive high roller bets, was actually rigged from top to bottom. The whole room went dead silent. Cheon cracked a grin and said, "You all know exactly what goes down when someone gets caught rigging the bets. If my joint is genuinely cheating, you lot can do whatever the hell you want to me." After the host read out the rest of the agenda, the meeting wrapped up. Cheon's casino was set up straight out of the auto repair shop. The bloke dealing at the casino asked some guy, "First time having a punt here. Mate, then I reckon you start with the easiest game we've got, dice." Charlie figured there was 0 point in dragging this out, especially since he needed that solid excuse they mentioned earlier before he could make a move. Keep your eyes peeled, guys, 'cause our main bloke is about to make that excuse with his own bare hands. He absolutely demolished the dice table with one punch, exposing the hidden magnet inside for every single bloke in the room to see. Charlie growled out, "You lot are nothing but a bunch of dirty, bloody cheats." Everyone on the outside reckoned this high-security juvie center was set up to sort out young crims and put them back on the right track. But ever since the 6th warden took over, this place had pretty much turned into a dead-set breeding ground for criminals. The whole prison ran on all these hustles, keeping a super steady stream of cash rolling in, as long as the cell block leaders slipped the warden a cut of their cash. I know exactly what you're thinking. And yeah, your average inmates would pull any crazy stunt just to get a taste of those insane perks. But out of all their little side hustles, the casino was the one making everyone absolutely lose the plot. even after blowing absolutely everything they had. The regular inmates couldn't stop dreaming about winning it all back in just one hand, and in those desperate moments, Cheon would toss them a bloody tempting lifeline. He'd let them score a massive stack of chips, as long as they signed off on a sketchy loan contract, and the Crims, totally blinded by the gambling, were keen to do just about anything for another round. When Charlie pointed out the magnet in the dice tray, the whole casino just erupted into absolute chaos, but the dealer scrambled to cover his tracks, swearing blind it wasn't a magnet. He reckoned it was just a pin to balance out the weight. Then the dealer pulled out a real magnet. Charlie put the little ball up to it, but it didn't do a thing and just dropped straight onto the floor. After that, the dealer grabbed some other metal bits to prove his magnet was actually legit. Seeing that, the other prisoners just took the piss out of him, mocking inmate 7,199 for throwing such a massive tanty. The dealer rocked up with 2 fresh trays, all set to fire up the dice game again. Not too far off, Cheon just locked eyes on our main guy with this heavy, suspicious glare that you couldn't quite read. Charlie lost his entire stack straight away without having a clue what went down. But trust me, mates, we'll suss out the real truth together soon enough. Stick around, mates, to see how Charlie's bloody rotten luck is actually hiding something much bigger. Yoonjo asked if he had any chips left, but our bloke just checked his pockets and chucked down a completely useless scrap of paper. Right then, another inmate in the casino who just lost the lot started absolutely cracking it, refusing to accept defeat and trying to take his bets back. You're all a bunch of bloody scammers. There is no way I am giving my cash to dirty cheats like you lot. But the hand gripping that screwdriver was instantly stopped dead by a massive fist, cold as ice. Chon Rayon asked him why he wasn't kicking up a stink when he was winning, and if he actually had a single shred of proof that they were rigging the game. But the bloke only had a gut feeling that the odds were complete rubbish. He didn't have any actual proof to show for it. So the boss warned him to stop carrying on and bothering the punters, shooting a very pointed glare straight at Charlie while he was at it. Having blown all his chips and with 0 solid clues, our boy gave up and headed straight back to his cell. But this was all exactly part of his plan. Meanwhile, 2 of his mates were pulling out the gear they'd sneakily nicked from the casino. Now listen closely here, because Charlie's only job was to cause a massive distraction for absolutely everyone. That way, Gunnamin and Magom could do their thing right in the middle of the chaos. If Cheon's casino was rigged, the card decks had to have some sort of dodgy flaw. Meanwhile, in the shadows, the casino boss was absolutely bashing the daylights out of the inmate who'd kicked up a fuss earlier that day. No matter how much he bawled his eyes out or begged for mercy, that bloke was dead weight to their operation now. After a round of ear-splitting screams, a silhouette stepped up. Yoonjo apologized to Chon, owning up to the fact that the bloke at his table was the one who kicked off the chaos. Chon Rae-yong just brushed it off with total indifference, telling him it wasn't his fault and to just get back to work. The casino boss couldn't wrap his head around why our main guy had such intense beef with the celestial dragon, but if Charlie ever dared to cause trouble again, he wouldn't think twice about sending him straight to hell himself. Back in cell 36, Gunnaman finally spotted the hidden trick. There were these tiny, sneaky little circles of different sizes printed on the back of the cards. Just by glancing at them, the dealer knew exactly what you were holding. Charlie finally had the perfect proof. Now it was just a bloody game of seeing who'd send who to hell first. When they released the prisoners who'd signed those shady guarantees down at the casino, you mates won't believe this, but there were blokes waiting for them outside, because that guarantee was actually a consent form for organ trafficking. They'd already booked healthy type O organs well in advance. Turns out, Cheon was also running a dodgy side hustle as a middleman for the black market organ trade, but one of the traffickers gave him a fair warning. If you prowl around in the dark for too long, sooner or later you're bound to bump into a ghost. If things went pear-shaped, the warden would get off scot-free, leaving the casino boss to take the entire fall. But he couldn't care less. He reckoned even the absolute worst-case scenario would be a walk in the park. At the end of the day, cash solves everything, and Charlie, armed with enough proof to absolutely ruin Sean Rayon, decided to march straight into the casino that very night. What Charlie had to pull off was dead simple. Just sit at the table, expose their filthy little scam right in front of everyone, and destroy Sean once and for all. But Sean had been waiting for him. This time, he was sitting down in person to play Charlie face to face. Even though our boy didn't quite get what his game was, this saved him the massive headache of having to hunt the boss down himself. The second the casino boss sat down to play, he instantly grabbed the attention of every single inmate in the room. Since Charlie was the one picking the cards this time, the dealer suggested a classic game of match-up. If you flipped over a matching pair, you won the round and got to keep revealing more cards. If you stuffed it up, your turn passed to the opponent. The main trick was just memorizing exactly where every single card was laid out, so anyone who could spot those dodgy marks was guaranteed to win, and anyone who couldn't was going to lose the lot. But what totally threw Charlie off was that this deck didn't have a single mark on the back. Gunamin was absolutely gobsmacked. Maybe they were just too tiny to see, but Magwoom confirmed that the cards were actually squeaky clean. Sean Rayong cracked a wicked smile and said real slow,
"Our casino only uses top tier.
Imported cards straight from overseas. If you've never played here before, we could always start with something simple, like catching the thief, because Chon had known for bloody ages that his decks were getting nicked. Now Charlie's entire excuse had just been blown right out of the water. Trust me on this one, mates, because Chon Rayong just slammed a massive wad of cash right onto the table. Check this out. Charlie was completely broke, so the dealer whipped out a contract to harvest her own organs. Every organ had a different price tag. Charlie just stood there, frozen for a good while. The casino bloke mockingly asked if she was scared, while Gunamin and Magom figured out the whole game was completely rigged in favor of the house. She needed to pull the pin right now, before risking the lot. It wasn't too late yet. But the very next second, every single inmate in the room gasped. Because that crazy chick, Charlie ended up betting every single organ in her body. Gunamin and Magom couldn't wrap their heads around her madness, knowing her opponent was going to cheat under the table. She still had the guts to risk everything like that. With the bets on the table, the card matching game officially kicked off. Charlie flipped the first card, revealing an 8 of spades, and the second was a 9 of hearts. Missing the pair, Xian took his turn and drew the 9 of clubs. If he managed to find that 9 of hearts Charlie just showed, his move would be a massive win. The other inmates were blown away. His luck right at the start of the game was absolutely unreal. But get this, the casino bloke knew damn well this wasn't just dumb luck. He'd already memorized the position of every single card, because he was in cahoots with the dealer. This trick would never leave a shred of physical evidence. The opponent just had to sit there and wait to get completely cleaned out, bit by bit. Qian reckoned it was ridiculous. He used to think his old man was the most trustworthy bloke in the world too. He loved seeing his dad work hard and come home with cash, but it all turned out to be a massive illusion. The second his dad stepped foot in a casino, everything went pear-shaped, to the point where he owed the loan sharks $500 million. And the worst part is, his old man passed away without ever knowing he got scammed by completely rigged machines. Xian refused to be just another mug. That's why he decided to side with the cheaters. By now, Charlie was at a massive disadvantage, copping heaps of flack from all the other prisoners in the room. They were telling her not to have a sook when she lost her organs. But our girl was about to show them how they were actually cheating. She flipped over a pair of queens back to back, and straight after, did the exact same with a pair of fives. Even with a hot streak like that, it seemed impossible to catch up to the 16 cards her sneaky opponent had already matched up. However, the speed Charlie was flipping the cards was ramping up insanely fast without messing up once, making every single move dead set perfect. Her rival was completely clueless. Supposedly, only he and the dealer knew where the cards were. But suddenly, the dealer looked over at Charlie and smirked. But hang on a sec. The night was only just getting started. Yunho noticed a scrap of paper on the floor that Charlie had sneakily tossed him, which had a specific time and place scribbled on it. Junho rocked up to the meetup right on time. Charlie told him straight up, no beating around the bush, that she'd already figured out the big card trick. But I also know that if the casino catches on that we nicked the cards, they'll swap 'em out straight away for fresh ones without any hidden marks. So our main girl didn't call him over just to explain things. She brought him there to save his skin, since pretty much all the dealers were only working for Cheon because they owed him way too much cash. They'd taken out extreme loans using their own organs as collateral. If Yunho agreed to give her a hand, Charlie promised to clear his entire debt, but he was terrified of taking such a massive gamble. Charlie then asked him if he honestly reckoned he could pay off everything he owed Cheon before getting out. If he walked free a week later lugging around that massive debt, his tragic fate was pretty much sealed. It was a dead-set no-brainer. No one wants to get their freedom back just to end up strapped to a freezing cold operating table straight after. What Charlie wanted Junho to do was bloody simple. He just had to expose the casino's dirty tricks right in front of everyone. Our main girl scooped up all the leftover cards in one go and grinned. Either I've got insane luck, or my memory is just absolutely flawless, because I struck a deal with the dealer and memorized every single card. Before she even finished speaking, the room erupted into absolute chaos. Right then, Junho spoke up too. He revealed that all the casino games were a total scam and that he could break down every single dirty trick they used. The inmates turned their fury straight at the casino bosses. Cheon furiously ordered them to calm down and quit kicking up a stink. But a second later, Charlie decked him to the floor with one absolutely brutal punch, and bloody oath she did. What an absolute ripper of an ending. Come along and watch the casino boss himself sign his own death warrant if he gets caught cheating right in front of the cell leaders. So Charlie was planning to do exactly that, completely smash him in a split second. Some poor bloke addicted to gambling racked up a debt of over 100 million with some loan sharks, and his own son had to sell his organs just to pay it off. The casino boss looked at himself, still looking after his old man in a coma, dead silent like cold steel. The organ smuggler sneered and asked, "Is this your late attempt at being a good son?" But Cheon forced himself to remember just one thing. Without cash, even your closest family can be sold off. To make a quick buck, Cheon Ryeon rocked up to the most brutal juvie center in South Korea to run an underground casino. But after exposing his dodgy little scam, Charlie ripped his mask right off. According to the rules, now he just had to cop his punishment from the others. Charlie raised his fist to finish the bloke off himself, but the bloke moved bloody fast and sent our boy flying with a single punch. Wanting the traitorous dealer to pay the price first, the other dealers took advantage of the absolute chaos and tried to leg it, taking all the evidence of the rigged bets with them. Cheon ruthlessly slammed Yunho right into the cold, hard floor. The main character rushed in to attack, but Cheon got rid of Yunho, tossing him away with a savage backhand. Caught completely off guard, Charlie had to step back while the casino boss battered him with a flurry of vicious strikes. The inmates were watching with goosebumps all over, but just pay attention to what Charlie does next. He vanished out of thin air, and Cheon thought he had done a runner, but the absolute legend popped up right behind him. A lethal kick sent the bloke flying through the air. Our Charlie wasn't going to run away, and he definitely wouldn't let this bloody scammer get away either. Cheon spat with disgust that he would never ditch all his cash just to run away like a coward. But after trading a few solid hits, Charlie clocked it. The bloke had absolutely no clue how to actually fight. Just as our boy was about to finish him off, Cheon backed away, asking if throwing punches was really that big of a deal. Then, out of nowhere, he landed a ruthless knee straight into our MC's guts. Taking full advantage of Charlie being stunned from the pain, Cheon used his momentum to spin around and sent him flying with a massive punch. The bloke absolutely looked down on anyone who only used brute strength, all while our hero's body was smashing through half a car. The rest of the prisoners never expected the casino boss to pack such a punch, but Cheon calmly announced that this was just a minor hiccup. His casino was running perfectly fine, no worries at all. But all of a sudden, Charlie started speaking again with a tone of pure, barely contained madness. To be honest, our boy never needed an excuse anyway, because from the very start, a casino only exists for one thing: to play games. Charlie wanted to play a little game of hide and seek with Cheon, and if he got caught, he was dead meat. Everything Cheon owned was tied up in this casino, so there was no way he could just leg it. I know exactly what you are thinking, but Charlie sarcastically asked him if he seriously still hadn't figured it out. All of his so-called achievements were going to burn to ashes tonight, and playing hide and seek was already getting way too boring anyway. Our boy suggested they switch up the game and rolled the dice, landing on a 3, which meant 3 brutal hits for Cheon. His rival just scoffed, asking if he was taking the piss, bragging that he wasn't some meathead thug relying on nothing but muscles like him. Charlie completely ignored him and just kept rolling the dice, making Cheon's heart skip a beat in pure terror. Our boy coldly told him that this massive brain he was constantly bragging about didn't seem to be bringing him any bloody luck at all. Before the bloke could even get a word out, Charlie absolutely pummeled him, landing 6 brutal punches straight to his face. Cheon copped such a massive flogging that his life flashed before his eyes, taking him back to the time he tracked down the recruiter for the Heavenly Dragon. He brought out an absolute fortune, desperate to join the Heavenly Dragon so he could rake in endless cash that would never dry up. But way more than the money, the recruiter actually preferred blokes who weren't scared of dying. Hearing that, Cheon just snatched the knife straight out of his hand. He was dead set willing to give up everything for a bit of cash, proving just how mental he was by slashing his own neck with the blade without a second thought. With that insane stunt, he proved he had what it takes to join the Heavenly Dragon. Once he was in the gang, Cheon actually volunteered to get himself locked up in juvie. But now here he was, shoving the other inmates out of the way like a complete madman as he sprinted desperately towards the exit. After all, the evidence of the rigged bets had already been hauled off to be destroyed, and that is where we leave it, knowing full well that without any proof, our Charlie is going to instantly become a massive target for all the other dangerous cell bosses. Come along with me to watch this whole cheating ring get smashed to pieces. The gambling gear and casino cash were scattered all over the floor. Mayum forced all the inmates to stare right at the scene. It was the hard proof of the rigged betting that the runaway dealers were carrying on them, right then and there. Xian Rayan was still trying to shield his dirty cash, but Charlie's game wasn't over yet. He chucked a massive load of petrol straight over Qian. Charlie announced that this final game would be called the Electrical Endurance Test. He'd already warned him. He was going to burn everything Qian had built straight to ashes. The other prisoners never imagined our main character would go this bloody far. Qian couldn't handle the absolute terror and ended up passing out on the spot. Snapping back to reality, the other inmates instantly bolted to snatch up the scattered notes. The white-haired cell boss had known for ages that the bloke was a cheating scumbag. With that, Shion's prison privileges were completely done for. 1 year and 2 months later, Shion was released from prison. The organ trafficker already had the tofu ready to greet him. The old bloke said he'd rebuild his life on the outside as soon as possible, but right before that, the trafficker made it crystal clear that he had to pay back every single cent he owed first. The money Cheon borrowed, plus all the stacked up interest, came to a grand total of 10 billion won. Since he couldn't pay up, Cheon ended up getting stripped of his organs. But pay close attention, because right now we're jumping straight back to the present. Our main boy had already crushed 3 descendants of the celestial dragon. While he was figuring out his next target, he noticed some random stranger standing right inside cell 36. The white-haired cell boss smirked and asked, "Is this the girl who died in the accident?" Before he could even finish speaking, Charlie had already lunged at him like a wild animal. He clamped his hand hard over the white-haired cell boss's mouth and ordered Gunamin to grab a pillow. That way, they could muffle the screams so they wouldn't echo all down the hallway. The white-haired cell boss used to get so bloody bored in prison that he felt like he was going to lose his damn mind. He even got so sick of the cell boss meetings that he started counting the swear words carved into the walls. The white-haired cell leader genuinely wanted a bit of a thrill. He was absolutely craving that dopamine rush through his whole body. And then Charlie showed up right in front of him. His arrogant and ruthless aura was just completely unforgettable. At first glance, the white-haired bloke's dopamine cells practically exploded, but with his mouth covered. He couldn't explain a single thing to him. And what do you reckon happens next? The main character's fist was flying straight for his face. The white-haired boss held up the drawing of the crimson fire dragon that Charlie had done. He was genuinely there to help our boy out. The white-haired boss managed to deflect our hero's attack. He knew our boy was hunting for that dragon tattoo before saying another word. The white-haired guy wanted to clear up the misunderstanding first. He didn't have any weird intentions with the drawing. It had simply slipped right out of his pocket, purely by accident while he was flicking through the sketchbook. The white-haired bloke said he wanted to help Charlie wipe out the dragons, but our main character coldly told him to piss off. The white-haired guy ironically pointed out that Charlie was way more stubborn than he reckoned. It's true that the cell bosses run this prison, but if he keeps acting this recklessly, the other cell bosses are going to end up killing him. There are people in this lockup way more dangerous than he imagines. Are you really still going to knock me back? But as convincing as he sounded, Charlie still didn't trust some ally who just popped up out of nowhere. It was bloody obvious there was nothing in this for the white-haired guy. Our main character asked him straight up, "What exactly are you hoping to get out of all this?" The white-haired bloke had to think for a second and finally confessed that his only reason was just to have a bit more fun. The next day, a group of Christian believers came to preach at the juvie detention center. The inmates, who hadn't seen women in ages, went absolutely wild in an instant. Spotting the Heaven's Cathedral sign, come with me as we look back at our main character's dark past. Back in the day, he used to hide out in a tiny room at the church just to get away from his deadbeat trash of a father. But Lida, who'd sneak out of the orphanage in secret, always managed to track him down. Buckle up, mates, because today we're looking at a story of betrayal where Yuna from the orphanage rocks up out of nowhere to take Daeon away. Terrified of running away and scared stiff of getting punished, Daeon had no choice but to hide out with Charlie in that tiny room. But the real shocker for our main guy was seeing that Miss Yoon was also tagging along with that missionary group. When lunchtime rolled around, the churchgoers started handing out the boxed lunches. They were pretty annoyed because the prisoners were being bloody rude and kept chucking highly offensive gestures at them. But right then, the jacked cell leader, Zelda, actually thanked them through his tears for sorting out the grub. The missionaries figured straight away that the bloke must be Catholic. But the second he finished doing the Christian sign of the cross, what came out of his mouth was a Buddhist chant of Namu Amitabha. Everyone was absolutely gobsmacked. Meanwhile, Charlie managed to catch up with Miss Yunya one-on-one in the room. The three of them used to play together heaps when they were kids. Yunja was absolutely gutted over the tragic death of her sister Dawn. She asked our main guy if he'd been feeling really lonely all this time, looking back on when they used to go to school together. Back in those days, she was always asking Charlie to go out with her, but he almost always had plans with Jan. Yuna was looking at him so sweetly, telling him that he wouldn't be alone anymore. All of a sudden, the guards' voices echoed loudly from outside the prison, since they were also heading over to grab their food rations. Pay attention here, because Unya suddenly remembered she still had to finish handing out the grub. With all his heart, Charlie just wanted to see her again after finishing his 3-year stretch in this absolute hellhole. But Yunja calmed him down, telling him she'd be back next week, since the church volunteered at the juvie center every single Sunday. While she was serving up the delicious meals, the young girl was acting super sweet and caring towards all the inmates. However, the other missionaries were absolutely fuming, watching what they thought was an obviously fake and put-on act. To them, those dodgy rumors about Yuna hitting up motels with older blokes just had to be true. Over in the mess hall, hearing that kind of rubbish made Charlie freeze up, completely paralyzed with rage. After they ate, the nun led the group prayer while the prisoners listened in, looking half asleep. But the second the prayer wrapped up, the nun dropped a massive bombshell, announcing that anyone could be freed from their sins that very day. Running with the vibe of being free for the day, the young girls hopped up on stage and started dancing real seductively. Get a load of this, because some of the inmates watching from the crowd were getting so riled up and excited that they couldn't hold it in for another second. Once the performance was done and dusted, the girls headed back to the change room to quickly get out of their gear. Those 2 inmates who wanted to use the loo earlier were now hiding right outside the door, secretly listening in on everything. With filthy grins on their faces, they reached out to push the door open for a cheeky perv. But our main guy coldly asked them just what exactly they thought they were doing. Literally a second later, a massive punch slammed right into them. Both inmates dropped to the floor instantly, but pay close attention here, because the bloke throwing the punches wasn't Charlie. The tough-as-nails cell leader muttered in a deep voice that the 7th commandment forbids lust, and that God would never forgive that kind of gross disrespect. The girls in the change room heard the ruckus too, so Miss Ema popped her head out to ask Charlie what on earth had just happened. Suddenly, she spotted something genuinely terrifying and absolutely petrified. She immediately ran to take cover right behind Charlie. A week later, the church girl came back to preach at the prison. Meanwhile, over in the donated supplies warehouse, Charlie was helping shift all the goods around and was already feeling completely knackered. He shot a suspicious glare at 3 inmates standing in front of him holding sharp knives, wondering what exactly they were after. Without saying a single word, the 3 of them raised their blades and lunged straight at our main guy to stab him. I know exactly what you're thinking, but he just used a carton of bottled water to knock 'em flat, and then drenched them with the water pouring out. Charlie figured out pretty quick that they weren't the masterminds behind this. He easily pinned them down and coldly asked who the hell sent them. Hearing all the racket, a prison guard yanked the warehouse door open to see what was going on, with the light shining in from outside. Charlie suddenly realized that Miss Yuanga was in there too, with her outer clothes scattered all over the floor. She raised her hand, pointed straight at Charlie, and swore to the prison guard that he was the one who attacked her. Because of this totally made-up assault, Charlie got thrown into solitary confinement for another 10 whole days. This time, not even the guard could keep playing favorites with him, thanks to the Ministry of Justice keeping a ridiculously strict watch over the whole solitary block. Stick around with me to find out why our protagonist just couldn't wrap his head around the words young Yuna had just dropped. Meanwhile, out in the prison car park, She was secretly meeting up with a twisted pastor hiding a dark past. She used to set honey traps to scam guys, and this bloke was always tailing her, calling himself a judge of heretics. And now he was planning to use the poor girl to completely destroy Charlie. Locked away in solitary confinement, Charlie was going over every single detail of what happened, again and again. It was bloody obvious that the whole thing was a carefully planned setup, and those 3 attackers just wanted to buy some time. The real goal was to use Yuna to frame him for an unforgivable crime, but she backed out at the very last second. She changed her statement, saving Charlie for the time being, but he knew that to prove the absolute truth, he had to bust out of that hellhole first. Our protagonist was still completely baffled. Who gave Yuna such specific orders, and why did she decide to change her story at the 11th hour? Without a second thought, Charlie asked the guard, "Help me call someone. Right now." At that exact same moment, the twisted Namgun Joseph was coldly interrogating the girl, demanding to know why she had caved in. Hearing that she wanted to put a stop to this absolute joke, Joseph leaned in close and whispered maliciously into her ear, "I've got some very compromising videos of you saved up, and if you refuse to keep working for me like you used to, I swear your precious mum is going to pay a very heavy price." But pay close attention here, Yuna, absolutely furious, screamed at him that she would call the cops and report every single one of his crimes. However, a terrifying scream cut her off when Joseph decided the poor girl was already completely infected by heresy. He intended to purify her right then and there, taking advantage of the fact that the car park was completely deserted. But right when the unhinged psycho was about to strike, Charlie miraculously rocked up right in front of them after breaking out of solitary. Seeing him, Joseph gave a cynical smirk and asked if he could hold on a sec. "I've still got a bit of business to sort out here." But Charlie just hit the button to shut the bus door, because he had some scores to settle himself. Turns out, the person Charlie got the guard to call was that mysterious white-haired leader who promised to help him out in prison. The white-haired bloke was eyeing off the solitary confinement cell with a bit of jealousy. He mentioned that the single cell looked pretty comfy, but our protagonist didn't have time to muck around if the kid really wanted to team up and wipe out those bloody dragons once and for all. So prove it to me first. Show me if you're actually worth the effort. And right here, mates, the white-haired kid went dead silent for a moment. Then he excitedly asked how he wanted him to help, since he couldn't wait to have a bit of fun in this madness. Back on the bus, Charlie coldly warned him to back the hell away from her, but Joseph just shot back that it was only a religious ritual. When his massive, hulking body moved, even the seats in the vehicle groaned under the intense pressure. But our protagonist charged right in, unleashing a brutal, dead-on strike against the deranged pastor. "How dare you hurt Yuna like that?" To Charlie, that kind of monster deserved to be destroyed without an ounce of mercy. However, even after taking a flurry of devastating blows, Joseph was still standing tall, mocking the young guy. He praised the precision of his fists, saying it was the first time he'd ever seen someone hit his vital points with such dead-set accuracy. He even admitted he was dying to know who the hell taught him to fight like that. Charlie launched another devastating kick, coldly firing back that it was none of his bloody business. But even after taking the hit straight to the chest, Joseph didn't flinch, declaring in a deep voice that he never trained to fight mere humans, since he possessed a body blessed by God. Following a deafening crash, poor Yuna covered her mouth, unable to believe what she was seeing. That man, the self-proclaimed divine messenger, was ready to carry out his twisted mission of judging the non-believers. Way before all this, at a summer camp, Yuna had naively opened up about her struggles with everyone else. Because of the massive debts her dad left behind, she was forced to separate from her beloved mum. Her only wish was to be able to live with her again someday. Joseph, who had gone to that exact same camp, overheard everything and approached her alone, promising to sort out all her debts. The only catch was that she had to help him on his heretic hunts, acting as bait in dangerous honey traps. And if she said no, her mum would pay a terrible price. And that's where I'm leaving you guys for today. Right as the pastor was about to attack, someone absolutely smashes his head in from behind. Come along with me to see how Miss Yuna tries to pull up Namgun Joseph. But straight after that, Charlie gets violently sent flying, and Namgun Joseph smacks Yunha right across the face. He reckons Yuna's already fallen into heresy, and decides he needs to step in and completely purify her. But all of a sudden, Namgun Joseph's body tenses up, completely losing control from an absolute gut-wrenching pain. He instantly spits up a mouthful of blood while Charlie just scowls. You know it yourself, don't ya? Every single hit you took went straight for your vitals. Not even a so-called body blessed by God could handle that kind of internal damage. And the pain Charlie was feeling, mate, it was absolutely nothing compared to the suffering she had to endure. Our boy grabs the cleaning supplies straight off the bus. For a filthy predator like Namgun Joseph, whether it was physically or chemically, Charlie was planning to completely chop off his family jewels. The bloke chucks an entire row of seats at our protagonist, following up with a heavy strike straight after. Joseph finally drops the holy act. This sickening religious game was over. But get a load of this, because a second later he feels another massive blow right to the chest. His internal injuries were already bad enough to knock him completely out of the fight. Our boy even gives him a friendly warning that if he moves again, his internal injuries are only going to get worse. Their fists smash hard right into each other's faces. The attacker just couldn't wrap his head around it. His punch was definitely way heavier. So how on earth was Charlie still standing? In the blink of an eye, the two of them trade a few more heavy blows. The miserable bastard realizes his body is hitting its absolute limit, so he decides to go after the girl to use her as a hostage. Our MC just scoffs at him. That so-called body, blessed by God, ended up having to hide behind a hostage just to stay alive. The size difference didn't mean a bloody thing at all. Compared to his old man's absolute tank of a body, this was nothing. Namgun completely collapses. But she's just laughing because she managed to get the whole thing on camera. And that's where we wrap it up for today. Mates, watching him calmly read out the crimes that this bloke was trying to hide. 5 cases of assault, 9 attempts, and another 4 counts of indecent harassment. Stick around to see how Charlie was willing to do absolutely anything to defend the little nun, if that bastard even dared to lay a finger on her. Without a second thought, our protagonist raised his weapon and shot Joseph right in the junk. He'd already given him fair warning. He was going to completely castrate this absolute creep. After everything he'd been through, Charlie knew exactly how to make sure a bloke would never get it up again for the rest of his miserable life. Right then, the girl asked him in a really soft voice, "Are you all right?" Charlie threw the question right back at her. "If they were threatening you, why didn't you tell me sooner?" She hesitated for a moment and whispered, "How did you know?" Actually, he'd noticed it from the little things. Whenever she wanted to say something but just couldn't find the guts, she'd absent-mindedly twirl her hair. He was absolutely kicking himself. He should have picked up on it way earlier. He warned the nun never to put herself on the line like that again, just as Blanco let out a massive sigh right next to them. "Young couples are just so sweet," he said, whinging that a single bloke like him was copping a direct stab to the heart. Our hero absolutely froze when he realized this bloke was the one behind the wheel. The bus, but the old bloke couldn't even tell the accelerator from the brake, so he just brushed it off. Get a load of this. Because he stomped on a random pedal while Roger was screaming that he'd get revenge on behalf of all the single blokes in the world. He was going to send every couple straight to hell while the bus roared right towards the prison wall at the exact same time. Yugun Chan, captain of the Celestial Dragon Strike Squad, was busy dumping the corpses of other gang members. When your average gangs get rid of bodies, they're just looking to destroy any incriminating evidence. But the Celestial Dragon's method is all about keeping the bodies fresh so they can use them again later on. The gang member they were about to dispose of roared in absolute fury. "You dragon bastards. You don't even respect turf anymore. And you've even got the nerve to trample all over your allied gangs. If this keeps up, you lot are gonna fall sooner or later." Juz just replied, cold as ice. "Then go to hell and watch it happen. Nice and slow." After dealing with the dead body, Yugon got a mysterious phone call. "Stick with me to find out how this absolute madness ends." 'Cause back on the bus, Charlie hasn't got a clue what the white-haired bloke is planning to do. Watch closely. Right before smashing into the wall, the driver yanked the wheel wildly, sending the bus skidding sideways and slamming violently into the wall. Brace yourself, 'cause today you're gonna see our main bloke completely lose his marbles. "Oi, pighead, have you gone bloody mental?" But the driver warned them they had to leg it, since with a ruckus like that, the guards would rock up any second. The white-haired bloke explained that this way, they could pin the whole bloody mess on Joseph. Since he'd nicked off without permission and dodged security, he wouldn't have a single leg to stand on. With the whole thing sorted, it was time for their white-haired savior, Roger, to make tracks. With a cheeky grin, he told the lovebirds to enjoy their alone time, while our boy promised he'd be back soon. Even though the nun would be worried sick, Yuna started frantically searching for something in her clothes. She wanted to give our bloke a little teddy bear keychain. It wasn't that long ago that the three of them were still mucking around together in front of one of those claw machines. But apart from the 3 little bears that Leader John had managed to score, the other 2 came up empty-handed. There were exactly 3 bears, one for each of them, bringing back something he'd said once before. And get a load of this, because as long as that symbol exists, no matter the distance, they'll always feel deeply connected to each other. Dan had said that the more he looked at that little teddy bear, the more it looked like her. The young woman found it while going through Lee's things. She handed the little bear over to Charlie, and then it was time for her to head off as well. The nun had heaps more she wanted to say to him, but somehow the words just failed her. But in the end, she told him with absolute loyalty that if he confessed next time, she wouldn't get mad, back in solitary confinement. Our main bloke was feeling pretty helpless because, truthfully, Roger was jealous of his private cell, which is exactly why he stirred up trouble on purpose, just so they'd chuck him into solitary confinement too. Jumping at the chance, our bloke asked him straight up how he'd managed to bust him out of isolation. The guard there had sworn they were keeping a constant eye on the area, but this white-haired bloke hadn't just managed to score a firearm. He also knew all about Namgun's crimes. Our protagonist wanted to know who he really was, but Roger just calmly replied that it was a secret. Anyhow, he'd already proven his worth, so based on their deal, the protagonist was going to cooperate with him. Roger got absolutely pumped and thumped the wall, while Charlie demanded he spit it out already. He wanted to know exactly how he was going to help him, but from the isolation cell next door, all he could hear was breathing. I know what you're thinking. Did this bloke seriously just nod off? Meanwhile, a recruiter is making his way up into the mountains. The Heavenly Dragon recruiter trekked deep into the mountains, since Chongguayong's Grand Pavilion was located up there. Yu was completely baffled. Why on earth would the second in command live out in some mountain village instead of a skyscraper right in the middle of the city? While Cha Gang-rian was wrapping up his training, Yugen Chan was brewing up some tea off to the side. After a quick exchange of pleasantries, Gang-rian asked Yu straight out what he had to report. Hearing that it was about the young master, the leader's gaze went dead cold. Cha Gang-rian's pavilion was so massive, it looked like a bloody city. He strolled over to the artificial lake and ordered Ju to speak up. The bloke reported that after getting locked up in juvie, the young master had gone toe-to-toe with several leaders. The result was no shocker at all. The young master won every time and absolutely crushed several of the heavenly dragon's seeds. This kind of speed was completely unheard of, and Yu reckoned his level was staggering, taking down even the person Yuon was keeping tabs on. They figured his old man would be absolutely stoked to hear it, but instead of pride, Leader Cha just looked massively disappointed. He was hoping to see his son truly blossom. But right now, there wasn't even a sprout. Charlie was just a little sapling, desperately trying to grow upwards. Being the leader's son, he couldn't afford to be stuck at this level. He had to make his boy bloom straight away. Back in the prison, the inmates tasked with hauling the rubbish were whinging non-stop. They were saying it'd be way better to just burn this rotten-to-the-core prison straight to the ground. Nearby, Choi Yunch, the top dog of cell 37, let out a massive laugh and dared them to try it if they had the guts. But they were all bark and no bite. Seeing these pieces of trash daring to act so cheeky, Choi just got even more pissed off. In the past, he'd viciously bashed a teacher just for running his mouth, leaving him with some dead serious injuries. And today, we get to see him beat these loudmouths right into silence. G'day, everyone. Come along with me to see how it all kicked off when a bloody snitch dobbed Charlie into Choi. The boss couldn't have cared less at first, but seeing our boy acting so cocky, mate, he just absolutely cracked it. Back in cell 36, the Crims dropped to their knees straight away to welcome back their real boss, since our bloke had been out and about. He barely spent any time locked up inside those four walls. It was right at that moment he spotted a fresh face in the lockup. Gunamine told him the new bloke had just rocked up, said he was a massive unit, a bit thick in the head, but not a bad bloke deep down. Just then, a guard gave them the heads up that they'd be dragged out for hard labor that very arvo. Breeding venomous grubs means shoving a bunch of nasty bugs into a single jar, just so they can rip each other to shreds. The last one standing turns into the deadliest of the lot, this juvie center. It's the exact same jar where the dragon breeds his monsters. He was dead set on making his own son swallow a poison that was even more potent, even more destructive. That's exactly why they chucked a ruthless psycho in there, a real venomous beast. Now pay attention here, because Choi found out about Charlie's work shift. He'd been absolutely sick to death of the kid's bloody arrogance for way too long, and decided it was time to make a move. Choi didn't give a toss about excuses or reasons. He just wanted to smash him. A little while later, our main bloke ended up dumped in a corner, absolutely covered in blood. Gunamine and Magoom froze dead in their tracks, but our boy bounced straight back up like he'd only tripped, chucking a whinge with a scowl on his face. This red paint on my gear, it's going to be a right pain in the ass to wash out. The inmates from cell 36 knocked off work totally knackered, practically ready to drop dead from exhaustion. But on the walk back to their cells, they spotted a trail of red paint smeared across the floor. Gunamine couldn't figure out why there'd be red wall paint down there, but Charlie clocked it instantly. That wasn't paint. It was pure blood. The top dog of cell 37, Choi, was slumped in the corner, absolutely soaked in his own blood. Shagangrion was hanging out for the day his son would finally make it big, but he knew full well that before that happened, the kid could cark it at any second. One wrong step, and he'd be wiped out on the spot. Just wrap your head around this for a sec. That lethal predator the dragon boss threw into the clink was already stalking his precious son, getting way too close for comfort. The other Crims couldn't stop yapping about it, wondering who the hell pulled it off, but Maguome had a gut feeling the new bloke was hiding something dodgy, because the newbie had disappeared for a sec, and when he came back, he had fresh blood caked on the bottom of his shoe. Right at that exact second, Gunamine yelled out, pointing straight at the new bloke. Seeing his body covered in nasty bruises and blade scars, the kid just scratched his head and muttered that his old man had done it to him. Off to the side. Charlie's face instantly went dark. Back in school, whenever he was getting changed for PE, it would always kick up these awkward whispers from his classmates. Those filthy, judging looks made living with his own scars bloody unbearable. It was a seriously sickening feeling. When the shift was done, all the boys from cell 36 hit the showers. Noticing the new bloke didn't have any shampoo, our boy offered him some of his own. The newbie just scowled, asking if he was feeling sorry for him. Charlie shot back, ice cold, asking if the bloke really reckoned his own life had been so bloody perfect that he'd have time to go around feeling sorry for others. At the end of the day, both their lives had been a miserable, dirty mess right from the start. Our hero told him to hurry up and finish washing. Once the newbie was done, only our main guy was left standing there, staring a hole straight through him in the showers. Charlie asked if he didn't find it a bit bloody weird that two strangers who had never crossed paths would have the exact same scars. Before the kid could even spit out an answer, Charlie grabbed him by the throat hard, 'cause he knew damn well this couldn't be a simple coincidence. Those marks were made by the exact same bloke. Our hero demanded to know, "Did Carry-On send you?" But the inmate just stayed dead silent, staring back at him with a dark, grim look. Charlie slowly tightened his grip, dead set on making the bastard talk the hard way. Years ago, the recruiter for the Celestial Dragon hand-picked a bunch of gifted kids for Shagengrian, completely behind the leader's back without him knowing a bloody thing about it. So Cha could do whatever the hell he wanted with them, even though to him, they were all nothing but absolute trash. He just wanted fierce attack dogs that could rip their prey to shreds. That's exactly why he gave the order. Wipe out every single one of them, except for the big guy. And that S where we wrap it up for today. Mate, little did we know that those carefully chosen kids were about to become the boss's biggest disappointment. Stick with me here, 'cause everything just flipped upside down in a heartbeat. That big kid got his neck absolutely torn open by another boy, and watching that bloody mess, Chaganri looked weirdly satisfied. That little bloke had the vicious eyes of a junkyard dog, and that was exactly what he was looking for. Gangren ordered the kid that, right from that very second, he had to start calling him father. Now, copping a brutal interrogation from Charlie, the fresh meat just coldly replied that he was nothing but that bloke's dog, stopping our MC dead in his tracks. For a split second, Charlie wondered why the new bloke didn't have that famous dragon tattoo on him. That crimson fire dragon. It was bloody obvious now that the newbie had never been part of the Celestial Dragons. He was someone Cha Gangron had personally trained. Furious, our boy demanded to know why this creep was stalking him. And why the hell did you take out that cell block leader who was just trying to mess with me? Even with so many clear shots, you never once tried to kill me. Dropping his voice, the kid demanded to know what Cha's real endgame was for sending him in here. But the new inmate didn't say a bloody word. Our boy let out a long, heavy sigh, but the very next second, he unleashed everything he had in one lightning-fast move. He hoisted the newbie right off his feet, totally overpowering him, and slammed him hard into the lockers, pinning his back right against the freezing wall. Watch closely now, 'cause the pressure on this bloke was only ramping up. He screamed at him to talk, but even as he was passing out from the bashings, the prisoner kept his mouth completely shut. Our boy knew damn well the bloke had plenty of chances to fight back. But right from the get-go, he never even planned on throwing a punch. He just couldn't wrap his head around Cha's sick little game. So for the next few days, our MC kept a hawk-like watch on the new bloke. Even when another con accidentally tipped a whole bowl of soup all over him, the newbie just politely apologized like it was no big deal. But there was absolutely no way the dragon boss sent someone in here without some cooked ulterior motive. Right then, Gunamin and Marguom were just casually having a yarn right next to him. All the while, the new prisoner just quietly watched him from a distance. That night, because of some scheduled site works on the back hill the next day, the four of them got called up out of the blue to clear out the weeds. And I know exactly what you're thinking. Something was seriously dodgy here. Those sharp slashes were gleaming cold in the scrub. Out of nowhere, the new inmate turned to Ma and asked if he and Charlie were tight. Before Ma could even spit out a word, the bastard stabbed him straight in a vital spot. Guo saw the scrub was getting way too thick and went over to lend a hand. But a split second later, our boy heard a totally blood-curdling scream. He bolted straight towards the noise, but he was a second too late. The newbie just stared dead into his eyes and asked if he finally got why that man had sent him. Under Gang Ran's brutal training, this new inmate's fangs had been sharpened to a deadly point, ready to rip apart absolutely anyone his father ordered him to. As it turns out, the big boss had handed him 3 missions. Number 1, infiltrate the MC's turf and wipe out any outside interference. Number 2, keep a razor-sharp eye on his son and track down the people he cares about most. And number 3, slaughter him right in front of him. The newbie coldly spat out that this was all to forge Charlie into the strongest, most ruthless son alive. But right then, 2 familiar voices chimed in, and the attacker he absolutely froze up. He was dead set certain he'd just stabbed him in lethal spots. Turns out, the boys had been wearing protective pigskin padding hidden right under their gear this whole time. Over the past few days, our MC had already been putting the pieces together on Cha's real plans. It made him realize just how far that sick bastard was willing to go just to toughen up his son. Even though he prayed Cha Gangron wouldn't stoop to something so disgusting, the filthy reality pissed him off so badly that he just straight up cracked the newbie with a brutal right hook, sending him absolutely flying. Our boy ordered the other 2 to leg it and call the guards. He'd had this whole bloody thing calculated right from the jump. This entire twisted setup had been orchestrated by the warden himself, taking direct orders from Cha. So in this absolute hellhole, nothing was really a surprise anymore. The guards would only ever come up here to bag a corpse. See, the poor newbie had been dumped by his birth parents when he was just a little kid, and because of his completely miserable vibe, he got booted out of the orphanage, only to get sold out by his so-called mates to a human trafficking ring. And you and me just saw how even the bloody traffickers rejected him because he was too scrawny and starved. Join me to see how this bloke escaped using his freakish strength and made a bloody crucial decision. Desperate to never go back, he promised to do absolutely anything. After that, Yuan rocked up like a stray dog and handed himself over to our main guy. And then he asked Yugan Chan, the terrifying captain of the Heavenly Dragon Strike Squad, between the boss's 2 sons, who'd come out on top. He knew full well that both of them had been trained in person by the big boss himself. So right off the bat, their fighting styles were bound to be dead set similar. And sure enough, every single move from Charlie and the new trainee almost matched up perfectly. Both of them had been trained by Shiganryan since they were kids, and they packed a monstrous punch. Kiwan scowled. Are you saying their skills are dead even? The new trainee was thinking the exact same thing right then. He threw a brutal punch right into Charlie's gut, but after copping that hit to the forehead, our boy figured it out. They weren't on the same level at all. The new trainee wanted to keep piling on the pressure, but our bloke hit back hard and forced him to back off. Even though they'd been trained by the exact same master, their strength was never going to be identical. Backed into a corner and absolutely battered, the trainee gritted his teeth. Pay close attention to this bit, because he point-blank refused to throw in the towel, and Charlie could clearly read his desperate intentions. His skills just weren't up to scratch, and he was trying to muscle through with brute force, but that tactic was never going to work. In a split second, The new trainee suddenly chomped down on two of our hero's fingers. Pushing through the pain, our boy kicked him away. At the end of the day, he couldn't have cared less about the bloke's strength or technique. He was just following his old man's orders. Kill Charlie. In a flash. His vision ran red with blood. Our main guy's fist slammed straight down. He warned the trainee that if he didn't want a miserable death, he'd better not mention that filthy bastard's name. After copping an absolute battering of brutal punches, the new trainee finally stopped moving. Not too far away, two knives were lying dead quiet on the ground. Yugen Chan reckoned the orphan would never beat the young master, but that was assuming it was just a fist fight. But get a load of this if that orphan got his hands on a weapon. It'd be a whole different ballgame. A chunk of Charlie's hair was sliced off in a flash. His old man had told him once that his talent was a weapon, to grab a blade and tear him to shreds. The scars plastered all over his body were proof of learning that technique under his dad's brutal training. The speed of his blade was absolutely terrifying, with a quick sidestep. Our bloke smashed right into a toolbox to dodge the lethal strike aiming for his ribs. The trainee couldn't have cared less how tough Charlie was, or if he was his dad's actual flesh and blood. Today he only had one clear mission: finish Charlie off, following his old man's direct orders. Our boy said stone cold, "Didn't I already tell ya? If you don't want to die a miserable death, don't mention him to my face. If you learned how to use a knife, how could I, his real son, not have picked it up too? A saw can slowly tear a person to pieces too. You just said father 4 times. So today I'm going to hack you into 4 pieces." Japan's greatest swordsman was known as Miyamoto Musashi, famous for winning over 60 battles, and that mad sword skill originally came from the Nitoryu style. That lethal Nitoryu style had countless swordsmen shaking in their boots. Charlie saw, and the trainee's sword clashed over and over in the blink of an eye. Charlie recognized the new trainee's style. It was just like Nitoryu. It had a wicked speed and the intense pressure of dual-wielding weapons. It left the opponent completely clueless as to where the next strike was coming from. His blade was way more dangerous than expected. Our boy bided his time, and their weapons clashed again with an ear-splitting bang. The new trainee gave a smug smirk. A saw is just for cutting wood, but his style was an art passed down for thousands of years. Real swordsmanship. There was no bloody way anyone could stand up to that with just a saw. Ever since he was a kid, the trainee had honed his skills with the twin swords his old man gave him. Abandoned by everyone since he was young, for the longest time, the new trainee saw Cha as his one and only true father. That's why, even if he was ordered to slaughter the family's biological son like a stray dog, the trainee would sink his fangs into his neck without a second thought. But what was really terrifying, mates, was that Charlie was looking more and more like the ultimate apex predator. Brace yourselves, mates, 'cause not even the wildest beast could survive a swing from this new bloke's blade. But our MC's eyes, they still looked dead set, like a cold-blooded hunter out for the kill. His old man taught him the sword when he was just a little tacker, burning one absolute rule right into his bones: dodge the lethal hits, bide your time, and the split second your opponent slips up, put absolutely everything you've got into burying that blade straight through him. That grim little chat was a reminder that once you draw your weapon, you'd better be ready to end a life. Hesitate, and sooner or later, that blade's gonna pierce your own bloody heart. The new prisoner saw an opening too. Charlie was copping the hits head on, just waiting for a stuff-up, but all that hard yakka wasn't paying off. The new bloke was planning to finish the job with this one strike, and instantly, flesh ripped wide open with a sickening crunch. Our MC had been patiently waiting for the new bloke to pull out his big finisher this whole bloody time. If he'd been holding a proper knife, that prisoner's head would have already rolled right off his shoulders. That hush lesson from his old man that you have to kill the second you pick up a weapon was echoing in his head. Get a load of this. Mates Our Boy coldly stated that using a handsaw actually has its perks, since the teeth rip through the skin bit by agonizing bit. It forces you to feel every single chunk of flesh tearing away, your bones splintering, and your veins and nerves being crushed all at the exact same time. A clean knife wound doesn't even come close to that kind of agony. But the new prisoner suddenly spat blood and asked Charlie if he'd actually never killed anyone before. You reckon you've got the guts to kill me? Do it right now, or I swear I'll slaughter your mates one by one, and then I'll rip your bloody heart straight out. A split second later, another massive crack echoed right between them, but the new bloke somehow scraped through and didn't cark it. Right then, our MC saw completely shattered into pieces, though he really didn't need to finish the job anyway. With gashes that deep, the new prisoner was bound to just bleed out and bite the dust sooner or later. The bloke was absolutely clueless about what our boy was playing at, especially since he snapped the saw's teeth entirely on purpose. But what the new prisoner struggled to wrap his head around even more was why the kid wasn't just putting him out of his misery. After that absolute bash-up, our MC dragged himself straight to the sick bay to get his busted head patched up. Through Muiom, he caught wind that the new inmate was hanging by a thread and had been rushed out to a massive hospital. And right here is where we finally clock Gangrion's twisted master plan. Bash up our MC's mates just to trigger his absolute fury. Step 2, keep the kid completely neck-deep in danger to totally screw with his judgment. And Step 3, force him to commit murder with his own 2 hands. What Cha truly wanted all along was to push his son right past the bloody point of no return. In the end, the new prisoner tried his hardest to rile him up with insults, but honestly, it just ended up chilling our boy out completely. Our MC definitely wasn't keen on taking life lessons from a mob boss, especially while locked up in the clink. The only thing he'd ever see eye to eye with Cha on was taking absolute control over this entire prison. From here on out, our MC had to completely cut the cord and break free from the old man's twisted grip. Meanwhile, absolutely no one had a clue where that ambulance was actually taking the new prisoner, but he already knew exactly how a father tossed aside the dogs who failed their missions. Dead set, terrified of being tossed aside, the new bloke started violently ripping the IV drip straight out of his arm. He wasn't about to rock up defeated just to get binned by his father. But no matter what he tried, those ambulance doors just wouldn't budge for him. A split second later, a freezing cold blade pressed right up against his vitals. Yugen Chan coldly sneered that a mutt trying to chew through its leash just has to be put down. He then told the prisoner to spit out his final words. But shockingly, the new bloke actually thanked Yu for putting him out of his misery before he could be left to rot. After dumping the body, Yu gave Cha a ring, hearing that his son had still refused to get actual blood on his hands. Gangrion suddenly just burst out laughing, muttering under his breath that kids never actually listen to their parents anyway. So he figured it was high time to teach his boy another brutal lesson. But right at that exact moment, the juvie lockup rang him again. On the other end of the line, the warden was absolutely losing his mind, screaming that Cha's son had sparked a massive riot inside. At that exact same moment, deep inside the prison walls, Charlie was stirring up absolute carnage everywhere you looked. Somehow the madman had managed to piss off all the Zelda gang leaders at the exact same time. The warden was delivering some seriously grim news. This time around, our MC might actually cop it for real. And that's where I'll leave ya. Mates with a flashback of a 10-year-old Cha smuggling guns for the Russian mob on a freezing winter's day. Get a load of this. By the time Shiganryon rocked up to the meeting spot, all he found was absolute carnage and a pile of dead mobsters. Out of nowhere, a fully grown brown bear lunged straight at the massive boss, turning the whole scene into pure, unadulterated nightmare fuel. That's exactly why Charlie was always bloody curious about where that bear skin in their house actually came from. That absolute unit of a bloke muttered that he choked the bear out with his bare hands. Yeah, right. Charlie didn't buy a single word of it. I mean, how the hell could a normal bloke take down a beast like that with just his fists? But his old man reckoned that with the right technique, even Charlie could pull it off. Right before his boy started his first year of high school, he planned to literally beat that skill into him. It was the only way to shatter human limits using the overheart. The kid knew full well his dad just wanted to keep him safe, but also kept him on a tight leash, training him in his own brutally harsh way. But Charlie would rather drop dead than let anyone boss him around, so he decided to trigger the exact kind of mess his old man absolutely hated. Our main boy chucked all the cash belonging to the cell bosses straight into the washing machine. The other inmates instantly swarmed him, trying to pin him down and hand him over to the cell bosses just to score some massive brownie points. Now pay close attention here. Mates, our boy's target was never these low-level grunts. He coldly ordered them to go fetch all the cell bosses. That cocky tone got them properly riled up, but they were just way too weak. Our boy absolutely wrecked the lot of them in just a few lightning-fast moves. But right outside the laundry room, an absolute tidal wave of prisoners came flooding in. Though to him, no matter how many rocked up, they were still nothing but bloody trash. What he was hunting for was something far more lethal. This level just wasn't going to cut it. Roger, the bloke who helped Charlie out, crawled out of the washing machine, clutching the cash and flashing a wicked grin. He knew damn well that if things kept escalating like this, the other cell bosses weren't just going to sit on their hands. The white-haired kid was dead curious about what our MC was actually plotting and how he planned to wrap this whole mess up. This totally wild turn of events had his curiosity dialed all the way up to 11. The MC stepped out into the yard to wait, and it wasn't long before every single cell boss showed up, all because Charlie had nicked every last cent of their cash. If this carried on, with no tribute money left to pay, their dodgy businesses would go under one by one. Goo, Naman, and Magenanom couldn't wrap their heads around what Charlie was bloody trying to pull off. Since he was basically declaring all-out war on Jaeon Minchul's most powerful crew. I know what you're thinking. Mates, but Block 1 actually gave him a chance to explain himself. The kid just calmly replied that he didn't need to. So the cell bosses instantly gave the green light. Get rid of this bloke once and for all for messing with our turf. The one and only technique that father ever taught his boy to smash past human limits was called overheart. Over as in going beyond, and heart, as in raw emotion, using your feelings to shatter every single biological limit. His massive old man always said it was a state that could max out every human ability in a split second. Right after saying that, he slammed his fist straight into the ground. That was the final lesson the dragon boss ever passed down to his own son. In that very moment, Charlie saw the fists flying right at him, let out a slow breath, and the very next second, with one absolutely brutal strike, he smashed straight into the two cell bosses lunging at him. The whole yard went dead silent watching him instantly knock out two heavyweight cell bosses like it was nothing. Even the white-haired kid couldn't help but mutter in total shock. At first he was wondering how the hell Charlie was going to wriggle his way out of such a massive, deadly mess. But it turns out, our boy never planned on running away. He was going to use the exact same power Chiganryon forced onto him to break free from his grip once and for all. In the US, back in 2003, an ordinary mum lifted a whole car with her bare hands just to save her little girl trapped underneath. In North Korea, in 1979, a bloke swam for 12 straight hours just to escape the dictatorship. In Africa, year 1732, a warrior kept thrusting his spear for 47 seconds after his heart had completely stopped, totally wiping out his enemy. Every now and then, this world spits out phenomena that just shatter all human logic. We're not talking about miracles here. Mates, it's extreme emotions completely rewiring the human body. Tapping into this state is the one and only way to push past the biological limits of our species. And today, we're going to witness it together. Come along with me to see how Charlie's mind is filled with absolute blind rage towards his old man, Chuck Gangry, reckoning he'd rather die than actually use his power. And the thing is, to keep that ability going, the face of his absolute deadbeat of a dad had to stay locked right in his head. That bloody image made him absolutely sick to his stomach. Right then, Yoo Hyun-soo, the top dog of Cell 12, barked at him with pure rage. "What the hell are you muttering about? Drop the bloody tough guy act." Growing up totally on his own, he absolutely despised anyone taking the piss out of him. So he just gave them a lesson they wouldn't be forgetting anytime soon. It was time to shut those bloody annoying noises up for good. Even if the whole lot of them treated him like some kind of monster, Charlie threw a massive right hook that sent Yoo Hyun-soo straight to the dirt. Our bloke couldn't give a toss about anything else. Whatever happened to the rest of them wasn't his bloody problem. Yoo Jun-hyuk, the boss of Cell 19, was already squaring up with his shiv ready to go. Silently stalking Charlie's Achilles heel, this absolute psycho was obsessed with the sickening sound of snapping tendons. Hearing that crunch up close was the only thing that could make this sick bastard shake with pure excitement. Ever since he was a little kid, people called him a prodigy because of his insanely sharp hearing. But in the blink of an eye, our hero dropped him with a single kick, snapping his blade clean in two. Charlie didn't want to waste another second in this dump, so Ryu Chul, the head honcho of Cell 7, stepped right up. "Now pay attention, 'cause this bloke wanted to finish the whole circus himself. He'd never tasted defeat in his entire life. To protect his mates, he had no bloody choice but to win. But today he was going to taste failure against a way tougher opponent." Right after that, the twin leaders of Cells 12 and 13 rushed him. Even back when they were just little rugrats in nappies, they could already see the pure disgust in their mum's eyes. That icy glare turned into straight-up cruel abuse as the years went on. Charlie flattened the pair of them with one massive hit. If there was one thing he absolutely despised, it was anyone bringing up family around him. Up on the roof, a mysterious bloke with white hair was watching the whole thing go down. He never would have guessed Charlie had a trick like that up his sleeve. Sung, the boss of Cell 17, launched himself into the fight, absolutely buzzing. The bloke was throwing brutal punches left, right and center, proving he was a proper freak of nature in a scrap. But in the very next second, that so-called freak got slammed headfirst into the concrete by our boy. The final opponent praised his insane strength, admitting that someone from the Heavenly Dragon mob deserved to be treated with absolute respect. Charlie definitely wasn't expecting a rival from the dragon. Did you and I really think he'd have an easy win? Brace yourself, mate, 'cause this is where the real dust-up begins. The blinding sunlight pierced straight through the heavy clouds, lighting up the whole bloody scene. Charlie had already smashed through 9 cell leaders, though for his liking, things were moving way too slow. The ridiculous scene was so mental that even the warden wondered if he was watching a bloody movie. Right then, Shaganrian only wanted to check one thing. He just needed to know if his own son had gotten hurt, but right at that moment, Charlie marched straight up to the warden looking absolutely furious. He snatched the phone right out of his hands and gave a cold greeting to the old man he hadn't spoken to in years. Up above, Roger couldn't help but give a sarcastic slow clap. Watching a wild show like that definitely had him on edge. He was terrified he'd never feel a dopamine hit that wild ever again, at least not inside this miserable hellhole. On the other end of the line, hearing his son's voice, the bloke asked a question just like any normal dad would. "Are you eating all right?" Charlie replied without giving a single damn. "The grub here is actually better than I thought. We've got hot water, and they let us work out during our set hours. To be honest, I'm way more comfy here than back home. I reckon I should thank you for the little present you sent my way. At least it made my dead boring days a hell of a lot more entertaining." His old man went dead silent for a second, before saying he was just relieved to hear he was doing all right, though he immediately gave him an earful for acting so bloody recklessly. Charlie just cut straight to the chase, because all he wanted was to break out of this gangrene prison. He already knew the rules of this absolute dump inside out. Charlie gave his dad a dead-set warning to enjoy his life while he still could, right before he comes hunting for him. Hearing that, the warden absolutely lost it, screaming about what his useless men were even good for. With so many bloody guards under his command, not a single one of them could stop one lone bloke. This whole mess had escalated way too far, and there was no hiding it now. The warden finally figured out that this joint could never hold Charlie. He had zero choice left but to send our boy straight down to hell. The warden really didn't want to do it, terrified that Charlie would completely lose the plot if he found out. Trust me on this one. Mate, you and I definitely don't want to see this monster off his leash. Come along and see why absolutely no parent would willingly send their kid into this hellhole, back in his cell. Our main character is giving everyone a proper send-off with a massive feast. He hands his books over to Goo, with Naaman's brains. If he actually buckled down, he could genuinely make it into uni. Next up, our boy passes him some paper and a notebook. Margu had noticed him scribbling away in the corner every single day, so now he could actually write home to his family. Goo was absolutely gobsmacked. "Mate, why does this sound like you're saying goodbye for good?" Charlie just looked at him, thinking the bloke really knew how to read the room. Right on cue, the guards start rushing our boy, barking at him to pack up his gear and get out immediately. He had been ready to go for ages, but he still had some unfinished business, and kicking up a massive stink was the quickest way to sort it. He gives Wiggum a nod of thanks, admitting the bloke actually kept him from getting too bored. Charlie tells him he's hoping the next time they cross paths, it'll be on the outside. Naaman tells him to look after himself, while Ma just sighs helplessly, reminding them he's still got a 20-year stretch ahead of him. He jokes that if Charlie ever gets bored, he should just go and get himself nicked again. Shaganri, having completely wrecked the Changrion block with his bare hands, is feeling just as helpless. He feels like his kid just does not get what it means for a dad to worry about his family's well-being. Our boy still has not managed to shatter the glass and finally break free. Pay close attention here, because stepping out of this jar just drops him straight into a bigger one, packed with even deadlier venom. A guard is marching our boy off to God knows where. At this point, there is absolutely no need to keep him in the dark anymore. See, this juvie center was actually hiding a completely off-the-books prison. Ages ago, back when he was still trying to figure out how to slip his old man's leash, Roger rocked up out of nowhere to drop some major news. Is wild stuff. This youth reformatory. Yeah, it is definitely not your standard lockup. Just past that thick bushland, there is another facility, custom built to cage the absolute worst of the worst. Back then, the white-haired bloke told him not to stress over it, acting like he was just mentioning it in passing. But Charlie got him to pull off something bloody gutsy, nicking all the cash the cell bosses were supposed to hand over to the warden. The guard leading the way finally pulls up. This is it, the infamous second block, strictly for the inmates they just cannot control. An insanely dangerous hellhole built solely to drown the absolute wildest inmates. Our boy has already geared himself up for an absolute bloodbath. But the inmates inside, they look way too normal at first glance. A weird creeping suspicion starts gnawing at him. The guard marches him straight into the office of the Ward 2 director, Moun Chan, who is in the middle of a phone call, while staring into this massive aquarium he custom built, set up to be an absolutely perfect little habitat. It is like he is admiring a tiny little universe he built entirely from scratch. Believe it or not, watching this fish tank is exactly where he got the inspiration to run the second prison. Even though it is crammed with dangerous psychos, the annual incident rate is only 0.313%. Ma asks him if he has any clue why. He just coldly shoots back a no. The block boss goes on to explain that there are heaps of fish in a tank. You and I both know they would tear each other to shreds out in the ocean. But in here, they don't. All because there is an apex predator dominating the tank. The shark does not even need to attack. Just having him swimming around keeps the rest on edge, shutting down any unnecessary scraps. He had watched the footage of Charlie absolutely flogging all the top dogs in the first block single-handedly. So now he wants our boy to step up as the new great white of his little pond. The headhunter, Yoo Hee-won, is dead aware of this director's shady track record and dirty little secrets. Back in the day, he was actually a massive international hotshot in criminal sociology. Out of nowhere, he just rocks back up in Korea to take over as the director of this juvie, dropping a massive bombshell on everyone. Even the heavenly dragon found Mayon-chan to be a major headache, because unlike your average wardens, you couldn't buy him off with cash, and you definitely couldn't scare him with threats. The only thing he gave a toss about was perfecting his system. The jail he built. It is basically a massive social experiment that he dubbed the Shark Paradox. He could barely wrap his head around how they were hiding something this messed up inside a state prison. What he really wanted to know was what the hell the government was actually planning with this whole experiment. The young assistant clicked straight away. This time,
The young master is ingenuine.
life-threatening danger. The regular inmates were just easy prey, and the director fully intended for our boy to be the apex predator, hunting freely inside the block. But trust me, Charlie has absolutely zero interest in playing along as this bloke's little toy. Look at how he completely ignores Ma and decides to just take off straight away. The beefy warden said in a deep voice that for an academic, the moment you explain your theory to a crowd that doesn't get it is the absolute biggest thrill. Charlie's body was pinned hard against the wall by some monstrous strength. Now this bloke was going to make him understand his theory up close and personal. The director of Wing 2 at the Juvie Center held dual United States and Korean citizenship, having graduated from psych and social work at a top-tier uni. His thesis hadn't just been recognized by academic circles over in the States, but he'd also been actively headhunted by the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development and a hub over at MIT. Despite all that, the place he finally chose to settle down in was Korea. The boss only had one condition: to set up Wing 2 of the Juvie Center to rehabilitate extremely dangerous youths, the ones that current South Korean laws could barely handle, and use them in social correction experiments. This was a ridiculously dangerous mission, and the reason the Korean government greenlit such an absurd plan wasn't just down to his impressive academic track record, but because he had the sheer brute strength to wrestle down violent thugs with his bare hands in an emergency. Mawon Chang, who used to serve in the Special Ops for the United States Army. Pay close attention here. He was desperate to find out what kind of shark Charlie would be, throwing a genuinely thunderous and brutal punch. Lucky for him, the kid slipped out of his grip at the very last second. The warden's curiosity was just bursting at the seams now. He was itching to dissect and analyze our main guy with his own two hands. There were already 4 sharks locked up in this prison, and going by his own personal definitions, he'd already assigned a specific species to each of them. So what he wanted to know more than anything was what type of shark the 5th one, Charlie, would turn out to be. Suddenly all movement just stopped. He couldn't wrap his head around what the hell had just happened, because it felt like his fist had just slammed into a whole bloody ocean. Ma Wen-chang stood dead still for half a second before bursting into a massive, booming laugh. He even subconsciously blurted out a bunch of praises in English right after. He ordered the guards to bring in that special item. Originally, he wanted to use the term sharks for the special management class, but his higher-ups hadn't given it the nod, and this black name tag was the symbol for that exact class. In this lockup, the black tags held absolute power over your standard white tags. I know you guys are thinking the exact same thing as me. Wen Chang knew he'd attacked him 21 times, and Charlie had plenty of chances to strike back. That attitude of not taking the warden seriously sparked an absolute fascination in him. It was the very first time he'd come across a case he just couldn't put a label on. Wen Chang decided to sit tight and watch patiently for now, waiting for our boy to show his true colors. At the exact same time, the inmates in a certain cell got wind that a new shark was on the way. 2 of the inmates were whispering amongst themselves about how to make the first move to get rid of this shark. But the very second Charlie stepped into that cell, the inmate Butayan rushed straight over, dropping to his knees to suck up to him. Another inmate, Jun, even fell to his knees, begging desperately for the main guy not to kill him, which just made Charlie scowl in pure disgust. So these were the regular fish the warden had mentioned. He took a look around his new cell and saw that the setup was actually pretty decent. Then Charlie picked up on something else. They didn't do roll call in the Arvo here, and the guards barely stepped in. But that just made things even weirder. If they had this much freedom, why? Why was the accident rate still sitting at pretty much 0 with absolutely no supervision? In the dead of night, our bloke quietly got out of bed. He wanted to go and check it out who the other 4 sharks were, but no matter how hard he shoved, the door just wouldn't budge a single centimeter. Our boy just couldn't wrap his head around it. If the guards barely ever intervened, why would they bother locking the cells? When he woke up the next day, the other 2 inmates were creeping around hiding things in their hands, planning to spring a surprise ambush on him. But the second they caught our hero's eye, they instantly dropped to their knees and greeted him with massive respect. Our boy was feeling a bit peckish, so he just casually asked when they'd be opening the door. Butin was absolutely gobsmacked. The door had actually been open for ages. Turns out, the prison doors opened and locked automatically on a set schedule. Once they were open, they were free to roam. Let's find out together what's waiting for them next. Buckle up, mates, because today we're looking at how someone rocks up to the first prison to keep tabs on Park, right after our main character gave him an absolute hiding. He figured out that nearly all the blokes he'd been picking fights with and bashing were actually members of the Celestial Dragon itself. Even smack bang in the middle of a massive brawl between the cell block leaders, Park managed to eavesdrop on a phone call made by the warden. Nobody would have ever guessed that Charlie was actually the son of the feared Celestial Dragon's second in command. Right at that moment, the boss of the Celestial Dragon, Yoon Bun, who was chatting with him, reckoned this couldn't just be a bloody coincidence. Over in the second prison, nobody dared to go anywhere near our boy, all because he was rocking a black name tag. Though what really had him sweating was figuring out where the other 4 inmates with black tags were hiding out. Junsu was quick to fill him in, explaining that those 4 sharks lived on totally different floors. Each level was its own turf, and the first floor belonged entirely to Charlie. Tyson reminded him that the inmates never stepped foot on someone else's turf. It was an unwritten golden rule in this joint. It was an even stricter pact between the blokes wearing the black tags. And Wu knew full well that anyone who stirred up seriously deep trouble would end up getting shipped straight to the second prison. He knew those 4 sharks were straight up apex predators raised by the dragon, and even with our protagonist being Chagin-Grion's son, they'd tear him to absolute shreds without batting an eye. But pay close attention here, mates, because our boy was already marching up the stairs to the second floor. 2 hours earlier, he'd been racking his brain over this whole thing, round and round. The warden reckoned he wanted to scope out the situation, but there were way more eyes watching this joint. If the guards were leaving the inmates pretty much entirely to their own devices, How the hell was the warden supposed to keep tabs on anything? But the dead-set truth was that every single move Charlie made was under incredibly tight surveillance. Wen Chang was keeping a close eye on everything while jotting down notes. It had been 38 hours since the new shark was dropped into the aquarium. So far, he hadn't shown any dodgy behavior at all, which was a massive shift from the previous sharks. The protagonist's behavior was incredibly ordinary, and that right there was exactly why Chang reckoned he was a special bloke. At that exact moment, the prison administrator noticed his coffee-stained tie and asked if she should take it down to the dry cleaners. Chang told her to send it off for a wash and grab him another mug of skim milk. Right then, Han peeked out of the corner of her eye at the desk, holding Charlie's file. At the same time, the other 4 sharks had already caught wind of this 5th predator rocking up. You and I both know they were itching to see what kind of trouble the new bloke would drag in, and pretty soon after that, out in the fencing hole beyond the prison walls, the executive director took down his opponent with an absolutely brilliant strike. The external affairs manager, who just happened to be walking by, praised his cracking victory. It really was a spectacular bout. She was one of Ma's most trusted assistants, and on top of that, she was secretly part of the Celestial Dragon too. Without Wen Chang suspecting a thing, Sua nicked Charlie's file. The second prison was a place completely cut off from the outside world. It was a dumping ground for promising young blokes that the Celestial Dragon hadn't had the time to recruit into their ranks yet. Wu had planted Sua on the inside for the exact purpose of recruiting them, never expecting to score such a massive win out of it. Our protagonist old man was the forever number 2 of the dragon. The executive director clocked the plan straight away, secretly used the sun to climb his way to the very top of the dragon. Finally, Wu had uncovered Chagangrion's fatal weakness. His game plan was to personally destroy both the father and the son. Under normal circumstances, the sharks wouldn't go around killing each other, mostly because, after a bloody brawl to devour their rival, they'd end up severely injured, instantly becoming a sitting duck for the next shark. But the moment Charlie rocked up to the broadcasting room, he already knew from Tyson that the other 4 blokes were dragon members. A second later, a massive burst of static echoed through the entire prison's PA system. Our bloke made absolutely sure every single one of those sharks could hear him loud and clear. I'm Charlie, from the 1st floor. And on top of that, I'm the son of Shigengrian, the second in command of the Celestial Dragon. Whoever takes me down gets a rank up in the gang. Come and hunt me. Trust me, mates. We are about to witness absolute bloody madness. Brace yourself. Mate, because you and I are about to step into a prison where the peace and quiet is just a bloody front, held together by a tense standoff between absolute sharks. Charlie reckoned he'd smash that calm to pieces with his bare hands, not giving a single toss if he ended up becoming the prey himself. Not even Wen Chang expected our main guy to chuck such a massive provocation right at all the sharks in the joint. Something like this had never bloody happened in the entire history of the second prison. Wen Chang was so pumped he felt a shiver run right down his spine, absolutely frothing for the massive clash that the new shark was going to bring. After catching the broadcast, Yu Rim, the shark of the 2nd floor, was a fair bit taken aback. He asked the inmate sitting on the stool what it actually felt like, living with the son of such a massive big shot. The prisoner replied, absolutely shaking like a leaf. He reckoned it was a blessing, but when he picked up on the intense fury in that broadcast, he got so spooked he just collapsed right onto the floor. Seeing the poor bloke's face looked absolutely dreadful, he politely invited him to sit back down properly. That very same night, Jong-Won shouted Cherry on to a few drinks down at a street food stall. When they were younger, they'd come round here almost every single night. Cha, he said. Back in those days, we were both just a couple of freshies who'd only just joined the gang. John Won replied with a bit of a smirk. Who would have bloody thought that little rookie would end up as the second in command of the heavenly dragon? Have a listen to this. Their eternal number 2. Then he casually dropped the question. Your boy's in high school now, right? He'll be gearing up for his exams in uni soon, so he must be absolutely flat out. Gangrene told him to stop beating around the bush, knowing full well they'd already clocked that his son was locked up in juvie. John slyly took the piss out of how the heavenly dragon had turned into some sort of corporate outfit, but the chairman is still carrying on, insisting that only the absolute toughest deserve the top spot. You must have figured that, being stuck as the eternal number 2, you had Buckley's chance, so you just let your kid have a crack at it. That's exactly why you've been secretly training your boy in juvie, right behind the dragon's back. Gangrene shot back, absolutely ice cold. And what if it is? John never expected him to brush it off so casually. He spat back with pure disgust. A bloke like you, who reckons you've got me by the short and curlies, is only ever going to be fit to play CEO for the rest of your life. John didn't skip a beat. Your boy's already been shipped off to the second prison. That kid you were trying to raise into a dragon, well, he's just turned into shark bait. Before you go down, it wouldn't be half bad to sit back and watch that unfold first. I bet you're just dying to see how this all ends too. Our main guy's dad just stayed dead quiet, turned on his heel, and walked away. John watched him leave, laughing like he'd just won the lotto, but a split second later, a massive crash echoed from outside. He bolted out, only to find that Cha had smashed his car to bits with a single punch. He hurled a string of abuse at the boss as he sped off in his ride. At the exact same time, over in the surveillance room of the second prison, Hansua could feel some massive trouble brewing, all because Jerem, the shark of the second floor, had actually rocked up down on the first floor looking for Charlie. Back in the day, whenever Charlie heard someone sighing, he'd invite him to go chase after happiness. Now the big boss had marched down to the first floor to have a bit of a chinwag with him. Our boy was getting pretty fed up. Cut the bull, mate, and just get straight to the bloody point. Drim reckoned he absolutely hated scrapping, because fighting just made people miserable, but after hearing Charlie's voice, he'd listened to all sorts of negative vibes on that broadcast, and he wanted to find out exactly what the hell was going on. What could possibly make the son of the dragon's second in command so bloody miserable? Charlie hit back with absolute ice in his voice. Did you seriously come all the way down here just to ask something that dull? But right then and there, our bloke felt a seriously off-putting vibe radiating from the other inmate. He actually apologized if anything he said had rubbed him the wrong way. Truth is, he'd only come down to invite our guy to take a seat in the chair up on the second floor. He reckoned our boy had what it takes to reach true happiness, so he'd be waiting for him right up top. After the bloke took off, our guy was left deep in thought. He couldn't wrap his head around that gross, heavy feeling he got when they crossed paths. This bloke was built entirely different from any rival he'd faced before. He turned to Tyson and Yun and asked them what exactly that chair the spy chick mentioned was all about. Zelda's cellmate gulped nervously and said, it was probably the chair of happiness. A chair that makes absolutely anyone smile and feel pure joy. So tell me, mate, would you be keen to sit in it? All right, mates, brace yourselves, 'cause today we're stepping into the darkest, most terrifying corner of the second floor. Right then, the head guard was looking into the whole mess. Charlie had straight up challenged those terrifying sharks. It was way more mental than anyone expected. It completely threw him that the first one to crack was actually the least aggressive shark of the lot. Han couldn't wrap his head around it either. Why on earth would our main character publicly provoke those bloody dangerous crims? If her grand plan was to take over the second section of the prison, she was getting way too big for her boots. After all, kicking off a turf war between the sharks was basically a bloody death wish. And what about those inmates Jay had supposedly helped find happiness back in the day? They actually did reach their so-called happiness. Don Chang was pretty smug about it, quoting Aristotle saying the whole point of life is to be happy. So he loved watching miserable blokes sit in that chair of happiness, which gave off this seriously messed up, heavy vibe. The second a poor bugger sat down in it, that psycho from the second floor would starve them, cut off their water, and keep them awake for days on end. Driven completely mad by the extreme torture, the victim would eventually break, sinking into this completely twisted sense of joy. Every single inmate on the second floor was absolutely terrified of that chair. But now Charlie just walked right up and sat in it, totally of her own free will. Jerem gave her this overly warm welcome, while all the other crims on the floor beamed at her with these massive, creepy grins. Everyone just looked, way too bloody happy. Meanwhile, Tyson and Jun were absolutely shaking in their boots, because that nutjob's invitation included them too. Picking a fight with a shark like that was just begging to be killed. Neither of them could wrap their heads around what was happening. What exactly were all these psychos smiling about? Even though he could see the pure misery in Charlie's eyes, Wong Chang wanted to figure out exactly who all that furious rage was aimed at. More than just her target. He wanted to dig up the real root of her pain. In a flash, the memory of that tragic accident ripped right through Charlie's mind. Jay just stared at her and said, totally deadpan, just let it all go. Those petty little feelings are just standing in the way of your true happiness. Now listen up, because Tyson saw his golden ticket right here. The terrifying shark had his back turned. If they didn't leg it right this second, they'd never get another shot. They locked eyes, made a split-second pact, and decided they'd count to 3 and bolt for their lives. But mate, before they even hit 2, our main character had already launched herself right at the shark. She hoisted up that massive chair of happiness and smashed it over him with absolute brutality. All of Jay's annoying preaching had just chucked petrol on the bloody fire. She went completely mental, snapping straight into absolute rage mode once again. See, Charlie had battled severe depression since she was just a little kid, and it only got worse as she grew up. A long time ago, some shrink told her parents about this special treatment, relying entirely on pure psychological suggestion. They'd trick her into believing that whenever she sat in this one specific chair, she'd finally feel happy. It was a massively effective trick for little kids. But then that sick freak Jerem somehow got his hands on her chair of happiness. And right now, with Charlie's blind fury dialed all the way up to 11, just looking at this bloke made her physically sick. But get this, the guy just casually stood up and ordered everyone to clear out. Even though our main character had smashed his precious chair to absolute bits, the bloke didn't even bat an eye. He knew perfectly well that the chair was just a symbol. He could knot together another one whenever he bloody well wanted. Nobody expected him to be so chillingly calm. He just smugly declared he'd never fall for such a pathetic bait. Instead, he locked eyes with our main character and asked, "Do you want to talk about it? Let's talk about the person who caused all this rage, about all those words you locked deep inside your soul and never got to say." But Charlie just whispered, "Shut your mouth." Jay looked at her with this knowing smirk, like he'd figured it all out. That person was already dead. But honestly, he couldn't care less. He still had a few more sick tricks up his sleeve. Since a smile means happiness, he ordered her to picture the smiling face of the person she loved most. Remember when you two would watch movies, sharing your favorite takeout, all those little, precious moments you soaked up back at home? Think about every single moment of pure, shared joy. Keep remembering, right up to that final, brutal moment when they were bleeding out and their life faded away forever. With a totally twisted smirk, he asked how it felt to remember that beautiful smile. Do you reckon this sick psychological game is actually going to break her heart? Brace yourselves, because today we're watching the MC absolutely deck Jairam, who's just standing there with a smug grin, completely taking the mickey out of him. The very next second, crack, his arm gets twisted and snapped right in half. Our MC channels his strength and absolutely boots him across the room. He'd given him a fair warning too. It was just the calm before the bloody storm. The shock of the second floor definitely noticed Charlie's ultimate rage, but the bloke still didn't show even the slightest hint of giving a damn. Mindless violence is just gonna wreck your happiness. Absolutely sick to death of hearing that bloody word, Charlie glared daggers at Jairam and roared in his face. You bang on about happiness every single day, but you don't even have a clue what being happy actually means. He actually asked his big sister what happiness was once upon a time, but she didn't have a bloody clue either. After racking his brain for ages, he figured that happiness probably just came down to a simple smile. Just as he was about to keep yammering on, our MC's fist came flying right at his face. But suddenly, a sharp, splitting pain shot straight through Charlie's brain, making him stagger and nearly hit the deck. Seeing this, Tyson yelled out, asking what the hell was going on. Charlie knew exactly what it was. The backlash had finally kicked in. He'd been pushing that supreme rage power for way too long, and now his whole body was finally hitting its absolute breaking point. His emotions were dragging him down like a heavy swamp, while Jairam was absolutely loving the show, watching his opponent fall to pieces. Have a good look, mate, because right now, his face is showing the exact dead opposite of what he'd call happiness. Right at this moment, his face was just completely swallowed by dark, negative emotions. Jairam said he really hoped Charlie understood, because beating him down was the only way he'd manage to get him smiling again. But out of nowhere, Charlie grabs a jagged piece of a busted chair and strikes back, instantly slashing Jairam right across the face. Our MC stared him down and snapped, "Why the long face? Mate, I thought you were obsessed with smiling, so go on, smile for me now." Right at that moment, Hansua rocked up just in time to watch the brawl unfold. She could spot straight away that Charlie was suffering from the brutal backlash of using all that rage. The cheeky bugger hadn't even weighed up the massive risks, and he still had the guts to pick a fight with a shark. Han figured that at the end of the day, Gengyong's kid was really just a hot-headed little brat. Jairam touched the bleeding gash on his face and quietly muttered that he seriously hates fighting, but for the greater good, he's got to get the job done. He reckons the Celestial Dragon is an outfit that completely ruins happiness, just packed with crime and leaving folks suffering left, right and center. That's exactly why he wanted to bring happiness to the whole bloody world, and that was his whole reason for joining up with them in the first place. And right here, ARMC is starting to pay a massive price for tapping into that extreme rage. He knew full well that at the end of the day, the bloke was still a straight-up crim, but he held on to this twisted belief that happiness doesn't care about what's good or evil. Charlie ended up backed right into a corner, but in that exact split second, he just completely froze. In the shark's eyes, the whole world was just split into two things, happiness and misery, but then, out of nowhere, Charlie just vanished from his sight. He popped up right behind him, gripping a solid wooden stake. Charlie coldly asked him, "Did you really get yourself chucked into juvie just for your stupid little theory about happiness?" Back when Jairam was in school, his super gloomy vibe used to tick off all his classmates, which honestly left him pretty damn confused. Like, we're miserable people just not allowed to have mates. His lovely older sister used to sweetly tell him that if he just faked a smile to look cheerful, the folks around him would start feeling happy too. And then he'd end up feeling it too, 'cause happiness is catching, just like a common cold. To him, juvie actually turned out to be the perfect spot, seeing as it was absolutely jam-packed with miserable souls. He wanted to use the inmates in that joint as lab rats. experimenting to figure out a way to literally manufacture happy humans. Han never would have guessed in a million years that J-Rim climbed the ranks to become the second-floor shark over such a bloody ridiculous reason. Even so, the bloke was hyped up as an absolute prodigy with some unreal combat potential. Someone who could actually lead the Celestial Dragon one day. And the craziest part, he wasn't even going all out yet. Charlie couldn't care less what kind of twisted experiments J-Rim wanted to run on the prison inmates. He'd already clocked his true intentions, all while the two of them kept clashing fists with absolute brutal force. Battered and exhausted, our MC was clearly at a massive, life-threatening disadvantage. J-Rim geared up to land the killing blow, but his foot suddenly slipped right on the wreckage of a busted chair that our MC had planted there on purpose. And mate, that is exactly how our hero is going to win this whole bloody thing. Brace yourselves, because the happiness of this second-floor shark had absolutely nothing to do with love or sacrifice. It was pure bloody selfishness, just for himself. As a matter of fact, Jay's older sister suffered from congenital depression that was way worse than his own, but she never even showed it. She never once complained to her brother. But right when the illness completely took over, Jay actually followed her advice, started smiling at others, and finally managed to make some mates. Even so, she'd whisper to herself that happiness is contagious, dead set like catching a common cold. If Jerry's happy, I'll be happy too. Charlie never really wrapped his head around that girl's twisted way of manipulating things. To him, she was just being selfish, but deep down, our shark actually agreed with Charlie's take on it. Lifting the main character up with just one hand, he muttered in a dead-cold voice that his hunt for happiness was never about helping anyone else. Tormented by that congenital depression, he hadn't felt real happiness, not even once in his life. From the very beginning right up to now, there's only been a massive, deep-seated misery living in my heart. When the second-floor shark's heart completely filled with bitterness, he unleashed an unimaginable, absolute rage. Watching the whole thing go down on the security cams, Wan Cheng figured out the secret. And pay close attention, mates, because the explanation is absolutely wild. That supreme rage forces you past your own physical limits by instantly syncing up your nervous, endocrine, and muscular systems all at once. By pushing your emotions straight past the breaking point. The sympathetic nervous system triggers the fight or flight response, dumping a massive hit of adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol into the body. Your heart rate skyrockets like crazy, optimizing the oxygen in your blood to massively boost your muscle strength and put your reflexes into overdrive. On top of that, the adrenaline cuts down nerve inhibition and fires up your endorphins, turning your body incredibly tough and pretty much entirely blocking out any feeling of physical pain. The muscle fibers, the glycolytic ones that usually only run at 40 or 60%, manage to fire at 100% right in the middle of a fight, under extreme conditions. This superhuman strength kicks in by completely switching off the brain's safety limits, a phenomenon that science can actually explain perfectly. But this kind of absolute rage is bloody rare, and it almost always just happens by pure chance. Waking it up on command is the absolute first requirement to become a true second-floor shark. I bet you can already see where this is going. Wan Cheng compared this poor bloke to a Greenland shark. The kind that lives deep down in the freezing abyss and total darkness. It moves real slow, with dead, empty eyes, not showing a single bit of interest in its prey. But the second it locks onto a target, it snaps in an instant, turning incredibly violent and just massacring nearly every sea creature in its path. Scientifically speaking, this shark is considered the flat-out, undisputed king sitting right at the top of the North Atlantic food chain. He reckoned that our main character, always living in the shadows of others, would never understand just how terrifying it is to be completely drowned in misery. More than anyone else in the world, the spy just desperately wanted to be happy. Because of the lingering physical damage, Charlie just couldn't activate his war mode. He had to figure out another way to stay alive. The second he stepped into that extreme state, the kid's power went through a massive, radical change. Right in the middle of all that misery, he finally understood the true reason behind his pain and the actual path to finding happiness. That school assignment, drawing the happiest thing in the world, was a dead-set impossible question for the young spy to answer. Suddenly he started wondering what his beloved sister's real, genuine smile would actually look like. Not long after, Jerem came running to show her his drawing, hoping to see her smiling with pure pride. But all he found were her hands, cold as ice, and a massive pile of pills scattered all over the floor. He'd never forget that horrifying scene. His sister sitting there in that chair of happiness, while her body slowly went cold. That sister, who was even more miserable than the shark himself, just wanted to find a bit of peace more than anyone else. Even as she took her very last breath and left this world behind, she still had this weird, eerie smile plastered on her face. The tattooed kid saw this as the most beautiful bloody thing ever. From that day forward, he figured out a whole new way to chase his own happiness. Just like how we need the darkness to appreciate the light, and war to actually value peace. It's thanks to pure misery that we finally understand true happiness. Hearing all this, the main character just scowled with absolute disgust. Why the hell are you telling me this now? Spitting cheap philosophy before taking a brutal punch straight to the face. Mate, this is about to go completely off the rails. Stick around with me to see how he dodges the shark, swearing to avenge his sister's misery and carve out his own bloody path. I'm exactly the same, mate, so if anyone reckons they can stand in my way, I'll be the one to completely wreck them. Taking the hit head on, Charlie coldly snapped that he couldn't care less about his happiness, and that all his absolute garbage just made him sick to his stomach. Our main bloke channeled absolutely every ounce of strength into his fist, got ready to end the scrap right there. But the other bloke stopped him dead with an unbelievable amount of force, driven purely by absolute rage. He wanted to force our MC to drown completely in those pitch-black emotions, the kind that completely shatter any chance at happiness. When our boy blacked out, his mind plummeted into total nothingness. His body wouldn't respond. He couldn't feel a bloody thing, and everything around him just kept fading to black. Charlie asked himself, was he seriously just going to keep? Got thinking like this. But right then, a genuinely warm presence flickered in the absolute depths of his consciousness. Wen Chang was watching the whole bash on his screens. The brawl was bloody shocking. Sure, but it lacked any real scientific value. Pay close attention here, because he was hanging out for an unbelievable scene that would completely shatter the mold. But the kid's performance, it left him absolutely gutted and disappointed. He started reckoning that maybe the young bloke didn't even deserve to be called a shark at all. Deep in his mind, our boy finally saw his old childhood friend after ages. She looked at him and asked if he was doing all right. With an absolutely shattered heart, he forced a smile and told her everything was going absolutely perfect. But her expression flipped in a heartbeat, demanding to know what right he had to act like everything was fine. I am freezing down here completely alone under the dirt, in the pitch black. What bloody right do you have to keep going? I died, and it is dead set obvious it was all because of a miserable bastard like you. Her body started grotesquely twisting, mutating straight into the terrifying mug of his enemy, who taunted Charlie. I killed that girl for your own bloody good. Our MC wanted to absolutely tear him to shreds right there and then, but his body suddenly plunged deeper into the abyss. His enemy just kept repeating those exact same words he had spat at him earlier. If you want to kill me, then go and take total control of this juvie prison once and for all. Just as Wen Chang was about to pack it in and leave, a voice stopped him dead in his tracks. He honestly could not believe it. I know exactly what you guys are thinking. And yeah, our MC actually managed to get back on his feet. Logically, the massive physical toll and all those nasty injuries should have completely drained his tank by now. His opponent just glared at him, completely clueless as to what was still keeping this bloke standing. He grabbed him tight one more time, but to his absolute shock, something wild happened. Our main bloke tanked the impact, and in the very next second, the tattooed guy copped a brutal, dead-on strike right to the jaw. Charlie still had bloody unfinished business. There was no way he was dropping here. Fueled by blind rage, he went completely feral. The terrifying prison rival did not even have a split second to react before copping another devastating blow right to the guts. The force of that hit was so bloody brutal, it sent him flying straight through the air on the spot. Wan Chang had never seen anything like this in any medical record or scientific report in his life. A shark, completely chewed up and right on death's door, had just come back from absolute nowhere to hunt once again. This totally defied the laws of nature. Now everyone was absolutely itching to see just how far Charlie could push it. But his opponent was not planning on throwing in the towel that easily, either hell-bent on crushing his happiness. He unleashed every ounce of his dark power straight at him again. But the kid who had just picked himself up off the dirt was terrifyingly strong now, totally outclassing him in both speed and raw physical power. He slammed him to the ground with a savage stomp, completely refusing to let things end like this. He had to push our main bloke right to the absolute brink of destruction. But right in that moment, the tattooed rival felt a psychological pressure so horrific that it paralyzed him dead in his tracks. That crushing tension practically suffocated him. Even so, he ripped himself out from under Charlie's stomp using pure brute force. But our boy just used that exact momentum to strike right back. He was not keen on wasting even another second. A deafening boom echoed right through the entire prison. His opponent wanted to plunge him straight into rock-bottom misery. But truth be told, there was no need, because Charlie had already been living in that exact hell for a bloody long time. It was an absolutely savage fight to the death between two legit monsters of the prison. And trust me on this, the aftermath of this brawl looked like a bloody war zone that left every single one of us completely breathless. If you lot were trapped in here with Boss Charlie breathing down your neck, you'd be keen to break out of prison too. There'd be guaranteed brawls sooner or later, and he'd end up dragged right into the thick of it. Han knew that damn well. After all, bloodlines never lie. The main character turned out to be way more lethal than she ever bargained for. Every single inmate on the first floor was gossiping about this bloody showdown. The absolute slaughter of a shark was a monumental event, meaning the long-standing balance of power had been completely shattered to bits. A brand new order was about to be forged through sheer bashings and absolute bloodbaths. The little fish had no choice but to survive by keeping their heads down and hiding as best they could. This massive shift in power had Mao Chan absolutely shaking with excitement. As a scholar, he just couldn't hold back any longer. He wanted to classify Charlie, but after digging through all his books on sharks, not a single one matched our boy's profile, ever since he snagged his PhD. Anyway, this was the very first time he'd felt this bloody curious. Honestly, it nearly drove me mental. Pay attention here, mates, because this quiet little aquarium started churning with massive waves, demanding fresh blood to keep the ecosystem going. The more test subjects kicking about, the higher the chances he could observe all sorts of cooked phenomena. He thought about letting new subjects loose in the second prison. Meanwhile, over in the first juvie ward, Mom kept training his absolute guts out without ever taking a breather. He had heaps of martial arts books piled up all around him. A juvie lockup was already way more dangerous than the outside world, and he knew damn well no one was coming to his rescue. He wasn't about to make the same mistake or walk down that painful road from the past ever again. That's why the bloke made the rock-solid decision that he had to train. He had to get tough enough to survive in this hellhole of a reform school, but proper training never happens overnight. When practicing new techniques, stuffing it up was just unavoidable. Gunnerming told him to have a good hard think about it. A skinny little runt who breaks at a mere touch reckons a few kicks are going to change his life. Don't waste your energy. Mate, just muck around with me instead. After Charlie bailed, Go stepped up as the top dog of cell 36. Nobody had a clue why John was busting his arse so hard. And think about it for a sec. It was dead set ridiculous to try so hard when our main character had already put all the head honchos in the hospital. If anything, there was a bit of peace and quiet now. Still, Naaman was pretty keen to figure out where exactly Charlie had buggered off to. The bloke suspected our protagonist knew things way beyond the walls of this clink. Right when they were having a think about it, the bleating of a few goats suddenly echoed outside the cells. Turns out the warden was breeding a mob of black goats, and word on the street was they'd be chucked into a cracking stew real soon. Right about then, the white-haired bloke was bored out of his bloody brain ever since Charlie absolutely wrecked the whole prison. Even the cell leader meetups, the only remotely interesting thing left, had completely vanished. The white-haired kid was desperately looking for something to get his heart pumping. Just then, he spotted a dodgy-looking scene unfolding not too far away. The corners of his mouth curled up into a proper wicked smirk. Meanwhile, our protagonist was laid up in the sick bay of the second ward. The second he woke up, his last massive brawl immediately rushed back to him. He realized that the side effects of going into absolute rage mode were downright impossible to ignore. By then, his emotions had mostly chilled out as well. At that exact moment, Sua walked into the sick bay to tell Charlie to stay in bed, because happy hour was just around the corner. And that's a wrap for this chapter. Mates, I really hope you lot enjoyed it as much as I did. Thanks for sticking with me this far. You know the drill. Chuck us a like, drop a comment, and hit subscribe so you don't miss out on what happens next. If you're keen for more content, I highly recommend checking out these two vids on screen that I bet you haven't seen yet.